powers like your brother? Toshinori asked. No way, only Hiken's ability can do that, though it doesn't have a name yet. Izuku laughed, shaking his head before lighting his hand up a little. I can destroy someone's abilities, but I don't really like doing it. What about that man in the tunnel? Izuku frowned, remembering the suffocating feeling when the sludge man tried to take over his body. He hurt people, he tried to hurt me. That doesn't give you the right to destroy his quirk, Toshinori argued. Izuku felt something snap inside him and he stood up. He told me to relax, that it wouldn't take long, obviously he'd done it before. Then he deserved to go to jail, Toshinori scowled, standing up also. Izuku sneered unpleasantly. Oh, so you're okay with him getting killed but me taking away his powers is bad? He was just a common thief, the blonde said, not understanding why the boy would think that having a quirk would automatically lead to a death sentence. As far as Toshinori knew, a person's quirk, know how destructive or villainous, as some people being claimed them to be, was the motive for a person's death. It was how they used it. Right? But he had powers just like you and me. Izuku roared, the image of a little girl smiling as she held out a flower briefly flashing in his mind. Didn't you see the footage from Mustafa? People were getting dragged out of their homes and killed. The city looks like a war zone. And don't even get me started on those militia groups that keep popping up all over the place. Toshinori looked at the boy like he was insane. Didn't he realize where he was standing right now? But kid, this is Muzutafu? W. Izuku gasped, launching forward to look over the guardrail and seeing not a city in chaos but instead just a normal, everyday town. It didn't make sense. Izuku should have only been asleep for a few days, a couple months at worst. There was no way that repairs to Muzutafu could be done so quickly. Even with the added effort of people with powers was added to the labor. Activating his own ability, Izuku pushed his radar to the max, trying to find his brothers again because fear was slowly starting to bubble inside him as a horrible thought popped into his head. None of Hisashi's dots were coming up anymore, meaning he wasn't close or he had hidden completely by, but Tamura's was coming in loud and clear from the man next to him. Legs caving under him, Izuku grabbed the railing and looked up at the blonde with wide, terrified eyes. What year is it? The year what year is it? Izuku screamed again. Toshinori took a deep breath and calmly answered. 24XX. The number hit Izuku like a ton of bricks as he realized that he had been asleep for more than 200 years. Toshinori stood on the other side of the glass watching Tsukachi converse with Izuku. After realizing that Izuku gone into shock and was unable to answer any of his questions, the number one hero had called the detective, who gladly came and picked the pair up, thinking he would hear the story behind the naked man in the tunnel. Instead, Tsukachi found Toshinori in his deflated form, trying his hardest to get a visibly upset Izuku to talk to him, to say anything really, instead of just staring off vacantly. Toshinori had even used up what little of his hero time remained to carry the boy down to the police car, since there was no way Izuku would be able to walk down to the ground floor by himself. After they had arrived at the police station, Izuku had snapped out of his shock enough to follow directions, handing over his outfit over to forensics and letting it be replaced with a simple pair of sweat breathes and a shirt that said t-shirt before following the detective into the most secluded interrogation room. Pulling out his cell phone, Toshinori's fingers shook as he punched in a number, getting a rather annoyed sounding "what?" on the other end after only one ring. Hello, Gran Torino, Toshinori greeted, standing at attention, legs shaking with fear despite his best attempts to stop them. Toshinori, the retired hero, spoke curiously. Is that you? Why, yes sir. Why, you see I'm calling because I know why you're calling, kid, Gran interrupted, sounding angry for some reason. Your old pal Night Eye came sniffing around a few weeks ago looking for my help in convincing you to pass it along. I see. Toshinori frowned, remembering how his former sidekick had called him out of the blue, claiming to have found the perfect successor for One for All. Mirai called you, did he? Look, Toshinori, I know this might not mean much now, but choosing a successor should be your choice, the retired hero lectured. When Nana first told me she was giving her power to you, I didn't agree. Hell, I even tried to find someone else, but after she died, well, that's when I got it. Too little too late to hear her say I told you so, I suppose. Toshinori sighed and looked into the interrogation room, where it looked like Izuku continued to talk with Tsukachi, though he did appear to look more hostile than before. Putting thoughts of successors and Sir Night-Eye aside, Toshinori tried to steer the conversation back to why he had called in the first place. That's why I called, it's about Toshinori spoke, putting his hand over the mouth and lowering his voice. Did you and Mstr ever hear anything about a third brother? A third brother? Gran yelled loudly, causing the hero to pull the phone away due to the sheer volume. Where the hell would you get an idea like that? Is that Torino? A voice asked from behind the tall blonde, causing him to jump in surprise. Turning around, Toshinori saw Tsukachi standing behind him with a deep frown on his face. Eyes whipping back towards the room, he saw Izuku still sitting at the table, head bowed and body shaking as he furiously wrote in his notebook. Put him on speaker, the detective said, looking down at the phone seriously. Torino, you there? It's Tsukachi, course I'm here, the jet hero growled over the phone. Now what's this malarkey about a third brother? Izuku Shigaraki, Tsukachi said, opening up his notebook, noticing how flinched at the mere mention of the surname. After explaining my quirk to him and receiving permission, I learned that he's currently 14 but not currently attending school for some reason. He has a small family consisting of 2 older brothers, Hisashi and Tamura Shigaraki. The older brother Tamura is single and teaches at a privately owned school run by Hisashi the eldest and Inko Akitani his wife. They currently have a 3-year-old son Mikumo. Oh, and one more thing, he was born over 200 years ago. Both men were silent for a moment before Gran asked the obvious question. Could he be crazy? Possibly. My quirk has a problem when someone with severe delusions truly believes what they're saying is true, but in this case, I highly doubt it, the detective said, looking into the room where the boy was flipping through pages and writing at an astonishing speed. I've scheduled a meeting with a trusted psychiatrist and doctor, just to be safe, and I'm having an officer make up a bed in one of our cells in the meantime. Good, Gran said. I'll be down tomorrow to check this kid out myself. If I may, Toshinori coughed softly, lifting his hand well, looking slightly uncomfortable. Do you really think a cell is the best place to put young Izuku? He could always stay with me instead. Are you insane? Gran Torino yelled loudly from the other end of the phone. This may be all for one's brother. I know, Toshinori said, wincing at his former teacher's volume. But he's also one for all's brother. Shouldn't we help him? Waking up in the future and finding out your whole family, your whole life is suddenly gone. Imagine how he must feel. How he feels. Gran shouted, a loud crash sounding from over the phone as something fell, or was most likely pushed over. What if he's exactly like his brother, huh? Did you ever think about what he could do to you if he has the same power as All for One? Actually, Toshinori spoke, scratching his neck, thankful that his former teacher wasn't in the room right now. He kinda does? What? Both men said together. The blonde looked extremely uneasy now. When we were talking, Izuku told me that he could take quirks and roy them. Pardon, Gran spoke, his tone promising as swift a painful punishment should Toshinori lie. Forgive me, my hearing must be failing due to age. This brat can take, and what? He can destroy quirks, Toshinori confessed, looking at Tsukachi. That's what happened to the man in the tunnel. After a few tense minutes of silence, Gran Torino said he would see Toshinori bright and early tomorrow and hung up without another word. Tsukachi, however, gave his friend with an anxious look. You know this is a really stupid idea, right? Probably one of my top 10, no doubt. Tsukachi stared at his friend a moment longer before sighing deeply. I'll start the paperwork. All Might thanked his friend and turned back towards the one-way mirror. Oh, and one more thing, Tsukachi said, looking back, his hand just hovering above the doorknob, turning his head to look at the blonde. Well, I don't endorse him destroying the man's quirk. I should tell you that the thief you were chasing, I heard from forensics before heading in, his DNA has been linked to the deaths of over 7 civilians already. They're worried there might be more, so the profile is being sent to neighboring cities for review against any cold cases. Toshinori turned pale as he remembered what Izuku had said on the roof, unsure if he should be happy or not that the vile man's quirk was truly gone for good. Izuku stood numbly next to Toshinori as he opened up the apartment door with an uneasy smile. I know it's not much, but I hope you're comfortable, Toshinori said, walking in and flicking the switch and turning on the apartment's main light. Izuku gave a small nod as he took off his shoes. Thank you for having me. For the first time since offering to take Izuku in for the night did Toshinori finally realize that maybe he had made a mistake. Well, he had splurged for a 2-room apartment, the guest room if you could call it, that was filled to the brim with homemade thank-you gifts and albums containing letters from his fans that the hero just couldn't part with. The hero's own bedroom was equally barren aside from his bed, nightstand, lamp, and clock. The only personal touch in the entire apartment was 2 pictures. One of him and Nana at his middle school graduation and the other of Toshinori and Gran Torino before he left for America. Sure, Izuku could sleep on the couch for the night, but it seemed cruel to the hero to make Izuku sleep on that lumpy old thing. Even if it was a pull-out, the mattress was about as comfortable as sleeping on a rock, and equally as bumpy. Gruggle broken from his thoughts, Toshinori looked down at Izuku, who tried his best to ignore the sound even though the kid's ears were turning bright red in embarrassment. I take it you're hungry, the blonde chuckled, making his way to the kitchen. I'm sure I have something you can. Opening the fridge, Toshinori saw that the only food he had were a couple of the specialty meals that were tailored for his diet due to his injury. Not really the sort of food that someone should really be eating long-term, but it was either this or takeout, and Toshinori had no idea what restaurants were in the area since he never ordered out. Are we related? Jumping and hitting his head against the bottom of the freezer door from the sudden question, Toshinori looked and saw Izuku standing on the other side of the fridge door looking at his with tired red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry, the hero asked, looking confused. Why would you think that? Izuku looked at Toshinori. 'Cause you, never mind. No, wait, Toshinori said, wondering if Izuku could somehow sense one for all inside him. If he could, then this would defiantly serve to prove that he was related in some way to the quirk. I'm sorry, is this because of your quirk? Quirk? Is that what they call powers nowadays? Izuku asked, lacing his fingers together and fidgeting. I guess you could say it's more because of one of the quirks I took from someone. But we had to take it. The man who was using it was Dash. Hey, the blonde said, holding his hands out to calm the panicking child down. It's okay. I'm not judging you, okay? Just take a deep breath and tell me. Izuku took a deep breath to calm himself down. We call it pinpoint, that's what Rakshan named it. Pulling out his notebook from the plastic bag that held it, Izuku opened up and flipped through the book before landing on the page he wanted and showing it to the hero. Izuku had created an impromptu family tree when he was talking to the detective, explaining who each person was, but after the man had left, he had drawn a line under Tamura's name and putting All Might's name underneath. Pointing at the line, Izuku looked at Toshinori seriously. Pinpoint says that you're Rakshan, but since you're not him, I thought you might be related. The blonde suddenly looked uncomfortable for some reason. How does pinpoint work exactly? Oh, Izuku said, looking surprised. Not many people asked him how his powers worked. I only need to ingest a drop of a person's BLD and then the quirk can pinpoint their location. I really only ever used it for my family, and it can't work outside a certain range, and your own reading is weird. I don't mean weird in a bad way, I just mean, well, it's weird. Toshinori raises an eyebrow. I feel weird, huh? No. Yes. Izuku stopped and took a deep breath, moving one step forwards and placing a hand on Toshinori's knee, feeling the hero tense up under him as he closed his eyes. I feel Tamura in here, but it feels really deep down, like he's buried underneath something. Izuku didn't seem aware, but his quirk had unconsciously activated as red veins appeared on his body. Feeling all or nothing enter the other's quirk, it was like Izuku started traveling along some invisible path, heading closer and closer towards the center. It also felt like something was trying to reach back to him also, but just before they connected, a burst of energy shot out and electrocuted him. Ow, the boy said, holding his hand as he took a step back, fingers smoking slightly as he looked at Toshinori in alarm. What was that? That was... Toshinori began, knowing logically he should wait till Gran Torino was here to tell Izuku the truth. But something deep inside him was urging the number one hero to tell the boy the truth. My quirk, your brother's quirk. Rakshan, Izuku said, looking confused and shaking his head in disbelief. That's impossible. Rakshan doesn't have powers. Me and Hicken looked with ours and we couldn't find anything. It's complicated, but basically your brother had a stockpile quirk that he could pass from one person to another, Toshinori explained, not wanting to go too deeply into the story behind All for One and One for All. I inherited that power from my emsir and am the 8th person to have it. Izuku looked at Toshinori, studying the man in front of him before moving forward quickly and wrapping his arms around the man's skinny waist. Hey, what are you? Izuku sniffled a little, holding tighter. Nephew. Well, yeah, I guess I am your kinda like your uncle given our ages, Toshinori said, not used to having someone hug him in this form. Izuku shook his head, looking up with a watery smile. Nah, I'm your uncle. BLD spurt from Toshinori's mouth as he laughed, realizing that technically Izuku was right. Izuku's tight grip started to loosen as the boy slowly drifted off to sleep, the stress of the day finally starting to catch up with him as he nuzzled Toshinori's skinny city, yawning slightly. Rakshan gave me such a cute nephew, face softening. Toshinori patted Izuku's head and changed into his muscular form, carrying the boy to his bed, making sure to cover him with a blanket before heading back out to get something to eat. Although Izuku slept soundly for most of the night, for some reason his dreams were haunted by images of his brothers fighting. Well, he stood trapped on the other side of an invisible wall, unable to stop them. Toshinori froze up when the urgent pounding rang throughout the apartment. The number 1 hero nearly dropping his tea as he glanced at Izuku, who thankfully had not moved from his spot at the table. When he'd finally woken up and shuffled his way into the kitchen, Toshinori almost had a heart attack at the ominous way Izuku growled, asking for coffee, having flashbacks of his fight with All for One. After making some instant he had laying around, Toshinori, more a tea fan since his injury, he had watched in slight horror as Izuku all but unhinged his jaws to swallow the drink in one go before his head collapsed against the table. Not noticing the way sharp emerald eyes peeked over his arms, Toshinori silently made his way to the door and opening it and giving his old teacher a nervous smile. Hello, sir. Gran Torino thankfully hadn't shown up, completely dressed in his full hero costume, but that didn't stop Toshinori from feeling his legs shake in terror at the sight of his signature yellow boots and gloves. Where is he? The jet hero ordered, walking into the apartment. Before he could answer, Toshinori heard Izuku's voice come out behind him as the boy popped his head around the corner, a bright smile now on his face. Hey Toshi, where's your food generator? I'm hungry. Gran took one look at the boy, seeing the resemblance to All for One, and launched himself off the nearest wall, bouncing around as he tried to confuse his target a little before aiming an attack at his back. As if sensing what was approaching, Izuku activated All or Nothing and turned around and lifted his arms to block the hit. Flipping backwards and landing on the couch, Gran Torino looked at Izuku, who simply picked up a mug off the countertop, taking another of it before returning the cup safely to the counter. Once the mug was out of the way, Izuku started bouncing up and down on his feet, giving Gran Torino the come at me sign with his hand. Grinning savagely, the jet hero launched himself around the apartment again, surprised when started doing the same thing, dodging and blocking him every time he tried to land a hit. Hey, you two! Toshinori called out from the doorway of the kitchen, afraid for his apartment given the high speed these two were bouncing around at. Be careful. Keep out of this, Toshinori / okay Toshi. Landing down next to the sink, Gran Torino looked down and noticed a small freshly washed knife in the basin and the first aid kit next to his foot instead of in its normal spot hanging on the wall. Eyes glancing back towards All for One's brother, supposed little brother, the jet hero noticed a small band-aid wrapped innocently around his fingertip and frowned. Stepping up to the top part of the counter, Gran Torino lowered himself as close to the granite as possible, putting all his strength into this jump before he launched himself at Izuku. For a second, the Viridian-haired boy stood perfectly still, only to vanish in the blink of an eye as limbs as strong as steel suddenly circled around Gran Torino, pinning his own arms against his body. The world suddenly spun as Gran found himself staring at his wide-eyed student while a chin rested on his head, a smug voice calling out. Caught you? Toshinori looked at his teacher trapped in Izuku's arms, looking like a surprised cat, and tried his best not to laugh. Hey, Toshi, what's this guy's name? Izuku asked from his spot on top of the jet hero's head. Placing one hand in front of his mouth to hide his laughter, the man coughed. Izuku, meet Gran Torino. Gran Torino, this is Izuku. Snapping back into reality, Gran started to struggle against the person holding him. Let me go, you brat. Oh, is someone sad 'cause he got caught? Izuku laughed, letting the man go and moving backwards to avoid a surprise kick as he did. He's like a living grumpy cat. Gran felt his BLD pressure rising, taking a deep breath to try and calm himself down before pinning Nana's successor with steely eyes. What the hell is a grumpy cat? Tashinori explained to me what this is, cause there is no way he's related to Dash. The blonde clapped his hands together. Izuku, you're hungry, right? Instantly Izuku's attention turned from Gran Torino to Tashinori again as the boy smiled widely, nodding. Yeah, I tried looking for your food generator but couldn't find it. In fact, I only saw normal kitchen stuff. Where's the future stuff? Is it outside? Do you have jetpacks? Are there robots? Is teleportation a thing? Have we met aliens yet? Do you have jetpacks? Dash, you already said that one. Gran fumed from his new spot next to Tashinori. Jetpacks, grumpy. Jetpacks? Izuku stressed, looking at the pair with sparkling eyes. Oh shit, he's the same type of idiot as you, isn't he? Gran spoke, looking at the boy with horror as he turned to his former student and pointing at the boy. He's the FNG pure type. Tashinori smiled weakly, looking at Izuku, who had thankfully ignored Gran Torino's insult. Listen, kiddie. Well, the thing is, some heroes have jetpacks. Izuku's smile brightened and he leaned in closer, eyes sparkling. Technology hasn't really. I mean, quirks are always changing things. What I'm trying to say is, there is no future stuff. Izuku fell to the floor almost instantly, like a puppet whose strings had been cut, as a dark, gloomy cloud settled over him. No future stuff. Both men shook their heads. No aliens. Again, the two heroes shook their heads, wondering if All for One was secretly just as dramatic in his spare time as Izuku. No robots. Actually, Power Loader might have something laying around his studio, Tashinori said, looking at the time and realizing how late it had gotten, not noticing how Izuku looked up, excitement returning to his eyes. Maybe we can check it out after your meetings today. Thankfully, it only took 20 minutes to get to you, aimed from his apartment. Plenty of time to get Izuku some breakfast on the go before his appointment with Recovery Girl and Hound Dog. Izuku instantly got up, running to the entrance and grabbing his shoes, jogging on the spot as he looked at both men from the entrance. Come on, let's hurry, we can't keep the good doctors waiting. Wait, Izuku! Tashinori yelled as the boy ran out the door, the cry of Transformers echoing down the hallway as he did. Gran Torino snorted. Now I understand why the kid was on ice. Way too much energy in that one. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Izuku looked at the large gates in wonder, feeling like he had when he was a child and Hisashi and Tamura took him to Disneyland Tokyo. The three had spent the entire day going on rides and exploring the park. It was one of the few times that Hisashi's busy schedule and Tamura's health didn't conspire against the three brothers. It was also one of the happiest memories Izuku had of his family until Inko married Hisashi and they had Mikumo. Wow, the 2 centuries-old boy preparing to take a step inwards, only for a loud alarm go off and a large metal door came slamming down, nearly crushing him if Tashinori hadn't appeared and pulled him back just in the nick of time. Idiot! Gran Torino yelled, landing next to the boy. Are you insane? You could have been crushed. Said this was a school, Izuku declared, looking up at Tashinori and pointing at the metal gate. What sort of school has a killer door of death? It's a hero school, brat. The jet hero explained. Why would people need to learn to be heroes, brat? Izuku replied, reminding Gran Torino that frozen or not, he had nearly 200 years seniority on the man. How old are these kids? You better not be training child soldiers. Before the deflated number 1 hero could explain, the door opened and a familiar voice was heard. Have no fear, we aren't training child soldiers as you call them. All of our students are high school age. The group turned and saw Nedzu standing there, a large smile on his face in between Hound Dog and Midnight. Am I a mouse, a bear, or a dog? It doesn't really matter because I'm the principal, Nedzu waved, looking at the mystery that Tsukachi had called him about earlier yesterday. And you must be Izuku Shigaraki. It's a pleasure to meet you. Izuku looked at the weird being in front of him for a moment before getting up and grabbing Tashinori's ear, pulling him down so that they were eye level. You said there were no aliens? Ow, 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 the number 1 hero said, feeling his cheeks heat up in embarrassment. Izuku, Principal Nedzu isn't an alien? Midnight and Hound Dog snickered, having thought the same thing about the principal once or twice themselves as both students and teachers. Everyone had except Aizawa, who claimed Nedzu was an immortal being from another dimension who came to their universe in order to feed on the perpetual chaos of high school. He's right, you know, the high-specs user smiled, a gleam of light catching his eye. I'm just a simple school principal. Izuku stared at the creature in front of him before lifting his hand and making a sign with his fingers. Live long and prosper. That sent Midnight over the edge as she couldn't contain herself any longer. This kid was just way too funny. It made her want to tease him, and she looked at the boy slapping her flogger WHP against her thigh as she smiled. I love this kid. Can I keep him? I promise to look after him. Izuku looked at the peculiarly dressed woman, a shiver running up his spine at her sadistic smile, now hiding behind Tashinori, pointing at her. Stranger danger. All right, settle down everyone. Nedzu spoke, clapping his paw together and looking at Hound Dog. Would you please take out guest to recovery girl? The counselor nodded and growled at the boy to come with him. Izuku looked up at Tashinori, who gave him an encouraging smile and nodded. Giving the blonde a quick hug, Izuku ran after the hunting dog hero, making sure a good amount of distance was between him and Midnight, who was pouting now as he did. Izuku's face soon lit up in excitement again as everyone heard him launch into a stream of questions about Hound Dog's quirk as they left to go see the school's nurse. Nedzu waited until they were no longer in sight before he turned to the number 1 hero and his mentor. Now who's up for a nice cup of tea? Nedzu sipped his tea and looked at the pair in front of him. Gran was unhappily stuffing his face with some of Lunch Rush's homemade taiyaki while Tashinori slowly drank his drink, trying his best to appear as small as possible. Well now, Nedzu spoke, placing his cup on the saucer. All for one's little brother. I can't say I ever expected to meet him, mostly because I thought he only had one. Tashinori gave a nervous smile and nodded. Took me by surprise too, but he's defiantly connected to All for One. Tashinori, Gran Torino growled, pausing his eating to look at the number 1 hero sternly. How can you be so sure they're connected? What did you do? The number 1 hero's hand started shaking and he chuckled nervously. Well, you see, sir, hypothetically speaking, last night Izuku may or may not have used his quirk on me, and it may or may not have resonated with One for All. Gran Torino sat mouth open, processing this information before shoving the remaining taiyaki into his mouth to muffle his curses, jumping up and hitting the blonde on the back on the head. Now that is interesting, Nedzu said, lacing his paw pads together and leaning forward in interest. What happened exactly? And please be specific. Tashinori rubbed his head and thought about it, about the sparks on electricity that danced over the boy's glowing hand as it rested just above the hero's heart. It felt like his quirk traveled backwards through mine. I could feel every single person who's used One for All before me. I could feel Nana and her surprise when he brushed past her and the others. Then I felt the first, Tashinori answered, placing his hand over his heart with a thoughtful look. He felt so happy but also sad. He tried to reach back out to Izuku. Something stopped them from connecting. Nedzu frowned slightly. What do you think it might have been? Honestly, Tashinori said, looking at the pair seriously. I think the only thing that stopped Izuku from accidentally taking One for All was the collective will of the other users stopping the first. The room became so silent that you could hear the students outside as they ran down the halls towards their next classes. You're telling me that? Gran began, fingers clenching the plate so tightly that cracks started forming underneath as he tried to keep his emotions in check. One for All wants to be reunited with its family. That's bullshit. If that quirk wanted to return, then All for One would have been able to take it back decades ago. But All for One isn't Izuku, Nedzu reminded the retired hero, thinking back to when Tsukachi had called him about the boy in the first place. The principal had honestly thought that perhaps this was some sort of elaborate trap, or that the boy was simply the villain's son or clone and was completely unaware of his true origins. But All Might's words on this supposed connection between their quirks were starting to raise more and more questions. We know the story about the two brothers, yes, but how much of it is actually true? What are you saying, Nedzu? Gran asked. That somewhere back in the day one of the previous users doctored the origin to make it nicer. In case both of you have forgotten, All for One has slaughtered every user of this quirk, including Nana. All Might flinched at the woman's name, hand clutching his side to where his injury was. All I'm saying is that Izuku Shigaraki's mere existence puts the story itself into question, Nedzu answered, hopping down off the couch. And I think that the only way we can really be sure that he is who he claims is to tell him the truth. You don't mean? Yes, the principal nodded grimly. We need to tell Izuku what happened to his brothers. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. When the trio arrived at the infirmary, they saw Izuku sitting on the bed at the other end of the room having a conversation with Recovery Girl about her quirk hound dog, who was now unmuzzled. Watched the pair from near the doorway. Ah, Rio, the principal greeted the taller man. How's our guest doing? Anything interesting to report? The guidance counselor looked at the trio. Kid's honestly been on his best behavior since I brought him in. I sense but coming though, Nedzu said. But he got real squirrely when he found out what my mask was for. Hound dog continued, showing off the muzzle that he normally wore so that his rather large teeth and canine features didn't scare the general public. I couldn't make out exactly what he was saying, but he mumbled something about government oppression. Curious, Nedzu spoke, looking at the boy with new interest. Early decades of when quirks first became known to the general public were heavily redacted by the government and the Hero Commission. Very curious indeed. Thank you, Rio, I'll take over from here. The counselor nodded and walked out of the room while Nedzu watched Izuku stand up and immediately rush towards Toshinori, pulling the hero into a tight hug. It occurred to the high-specs user that since All Might carried the same quirk as Izuku's brother, then the boy might unconsciously be latching onto the only familiar thing he could. Hello again, Izuku, the principal greeted again. I hope Recovery Girl here has been treating you well. The boy nodded enthusiastically. Her quirk is really something. I was just saying to her I wish Hisashi and I had someone like her working with us. Nedzu noticed that Izuku's smile didn't appear to reach his eyes when he said this. That's part of the reason we came to see you. Nedzu, the nurse hissed in warning, looking at the three. The principal ignored her. Izuku, can you tell us about your family? My family? Izuku repeated, looking confused as to why the strange, not alien, wanted to know about his family. It's me, Tamura, Hisashi, Inko, and Mikumo, their son. And what are they like? Well, Izuku said, thinking about it for a moment. Hisashi is a lot than me, so I guess he acts more like my father sometimes than my brother, all stern and stuff, but he's really just a big softy underneath. Gran Torino snorted, but Nedzu ignored him. And what does he do? He's as a politician, Izuku said, remembering how proud he was of his eldest brother the first time he saw him in a suit boldly walking out the door ready to change the world. That's how he and Inko met. Actually, she's a lawyer. They're actually both work at trying to make it so people with quirks have the same rights as everyone else. Nedzu hummed. That's interesting. I've always been told that while society almost collapsed, nobody ever had their rights infringed upon. Then what you heard was bullshit. Izuku frowned, sitting straight. Ever since that glowing baby spilled, the secret people with abilities have had a target on their backs. The first person whose power I ever took. Izuku trailed off, face becoming mournful. Izuku, Recovery Girl said, looking at the boy with concern and placing her hand on top of his. Are you okay? Izuku shook his head, drawing his hand back from the nurse with another false smile. Hisashi and Inko want to change things, make it so people with powers and without can live together. They say it probably not be possible in our lifetime, but we want to make it better for Kukin and his kids. And what about Tamura, what does he think? Nedzu asked. He's gonna help us, Izuku answered, looking proud. We built the school, you see, and Tamura's teaching their cause. He's a teacher, that's where I was heading after. Inko, laying on the ground, running a shot, ringing out, yelled to Tamura, holding him and crying, Rain. Hisashi, standing in front of a stone figure. Everyone watched Izuku's face turn pale, and he started shaking. The nurse looked at the trio, frowning slightly, rubbing her hands on Izuku's back. There, dearie, you're safe. The nurse coached, giving the principal a stern glare. Toshinori cleared his throat. Izuku, do you remember how I told you that I have inherited your brother's quirk from my... The bushy-haired boy nodded weakly. Yeah, I don't really get how it works, but I guess Tamura being able to pass his quirk along to people fits with our family. There was a reason, the gaunt blonde said. I don't know how, but after you must have disappeared, but hi, your elder brother adopted a new persona and took the name All for One. He became a criminal. What? Tamura tried to stop him but was captured, and All for One forced another quirk on him, combining it with his own stockpile quirk, creating One for All in the process, Toshinori explained as Izuku stared at him with a look of pure disbelief. All for One somehow found a way to cheat death, and since then we, the people who inherited Tamura's quirk, and I have been trying to stop him. Izuku's hands snapped to his ears, trying to block the words before he could hear any more lies. That can't be true, Izuku cried, tears making their way to his eyes. He wouldn't. Hicken loves us, he wouldn't hurt me or Tamura. Gran, not known for his patience, lost what little he had and grabbed Tashinori's oversized white shirt, lifting it up and showing off the scar beneath for all to see. Do you see this? This is what your precious Hicken did. Tashinori's lucky to be alive. Gran Torino. Recovery girl bellowed in anger, her customary needle cane hitting the floor in silent warning. No. Gran growled, jumping over onto the bed and grabbing Izuku's shirt, forcing him to look directly into the retired hero's eyes. My best friend, Tashinori's Empire Nana, he killed her in cold blood right in front of us. I don't care what he was like 200 years ago, that man is a monster now, plain and simple. Anger exploded out of Izuku and he grabbed Gran's wrist, glaring back. What do you want me to say? Sorry. Would making the monster brother bow down and apologize to you make everything better? Tell me, what do you want? I want you to acknowledge that this is real, Gran yelled. You think I'm stupid? You act like you're fine, but that's a load of bullshit. Of course I'm not fine, Izuku bellowed, pulling out of Gran's grip and standing up, hands clenched tightly into fists. I wish this was a fing dream. I cut my finger this morning thinking I would wake up and everything would be back to normal. But that didn't happen, and now I'm all alone in a strange world, and the only people who want to help me only seem to be doing this out of pity or because they're afraid of me. Tashinori shook his head, one hand reaching out the boy. Izuku, no. Izuku yelled, activating his quirk. The other occupants of the room felt themselves be pushed back by some sort of invisible wave. They barely had time to react before Izuku had jumped towards a closed window, his power shooting out of him like a bolt of pure energy and breaking the glass into so many tiny pieces as he ran away from them as fast as he could. All for One thanked the doctor with clenched teeth and hung up the phone. After sensing Izuku, he had put the notice to anyone in his organization that worked in the police or medical field to be on the lookout for his long-thought, dead sibling. Though no one knew exactly who they were searching for, just that the boy was to be delivered to All for One as soon as possible, alive and unharmed. Of course, the symbol of evil could have asked Tamura and Kurogiri to join the search. However, Tamura was enthusiastic, to say the least, and Hisashi didn't want either of them hurt. Given Izuku's perchance for a combination of fight and flight and Tamura's destructive nature, there was an excellent chance they would hurt each other, or worse. And asking any villains under his control ran the risk of drawing unwanted attention from the heroes. Not to mention the more foolish villains might think capturing Izuku would be an excellent way to make a bid for power. Unfortunately, it happened more than once when Tamura was young, and there was no way that Hisashi would risk anything like that happening again. This was especially so after that last time. Tamura still had the scar from his attackers despite Hisashi's many healing quirks. No, All for One had to find his baby brother as quietly as possible. Izuku was probably so scared and confused right now. The world had changed so much in the last 200 years, and as strong as he was, Izuku was also just as fragile. Hisashi wasn't going to make the same mistake again like he had with Tamura, thinking would be safe once he had his own quirk. How naive he had been back then. All for One, he dug his nails into the soft padding of his chair, lost in a sea of memories and paranoid thoughts. What if Izuku was hurt? What if he was already in the hands of the heroes? What if he was dead? Hisashi only had a connection with Izuku for a split second before it faded away. Could his mind possibly be failing or tricking him due to his injury? This was All Might's fault. Hisashi raged bitterly, slamming his arm down at the mere thought of that smiling idiot. All Might and all the other sneaky thieves like him passing along Tamura's quirk as if belonged to them. Tamura's quirk was his. It was the only thing he had left of his brother. Who were they to keep the last thing Hisashi had of his brother in this world from him? Sensei, a raspy voice whispered. Mr. Kurogiri's concerned voice followed. Are you feeling all right? Should I call the doctor? Hisashi felt 4 fingers grip the cuffs of his jacket and smiled, letting the rage leave his body, knowing it was young Tamura. Reaching up, Hisashi blindly placed his hand on the boy's head, frowning slightly greasy feeling of it and sighing. I see you've up all night playing video games again, Hisashi chuckled, using one of his inferred quick and seeing Tamura's cheeks heat up. You really should take better care of yourself, Tamura. Sorry, sensei. Hisashi smiled slightly and ruffled the younger man's hair again. When he had first come across young Tenko Shimura in that alley, it struck him just how much he looked like Tamura. Hisashi wondered if the similarities in their appearance were because Nana got P-arginine tea when she carried one for all. It certainly explained decay, a mutated version of Nana's biological father's dehydration quirk combining with the remnants of one for all that Kotaro Shimura carried dormant within him. Young Tenko's awakening to this power and accidentally killing his whole family unknowingly ended up drawing Hisashi's attention. He had followed the small embers of his brother quirk to the boy thinking perhaps Tenko was All Might's successor. Instead of killing him though, Hisashi reached out his hand after seeing the condition Tenko had been in and never looked back. Though he did feel some satisfaction knowing that the news would definitely be a delicious blow to All Might's ego. But plans started changing a little more each day as Hisashi felt like fate gave him another chance at having a son. Especially when he learned that Tenko shared the same birthday as Mikumo. Hisashi never once thought of Tenko as a replacement for his lost child, but instead was as a new son altogether, one that he would protect no matter what the cost. Hisashi had even bestowed on him the name Tamura in honor of his brother. Though he told the boy, it was because the name meant to mourn rather than the truth behind it. The Shigaraki matriarch had been a cruel woman when naming her sons, and as such Hisashi felt it only proper to take advantage of that cruelty for himself. Sensei, Tamura's voice came again, snapping all for one out of his thoughts. Forgive me, Tamura. I'm just a little tired, the man assured his student/adopted son. I think I'll take a nap before our lessons this evening. Why don't you return to the bar with Kurogyari and do the same? Tonight, if all goes well, your present will ready for you, and we can start the next stage of your training. Although he couldn't see it, All for One knew his son was smiling at the thought of getting his very own Nomu. The pair wished the overman a pleasant sleep before leaving in one of Kurogyari's warp gates. Hisashi really did hate keeping secrets from Tamura. Still, for now, the boy was safest remaining in the dark about All for One's search for Izuku. Computer, Hisashi spoke into the mic near his mouth. Pull up file MAS01 and play. Not a second later, Hisashi heard the sound of Izuku's giggling. Even though he was unable to see the video anymore, Hisashi had every detail of the footage engraved into his memory. The sound of a door creaking open followed by a jovial surprise from both the younger Shigaraki brothers played on the screen as All for One's younger self looked at the camera. Hisashi heard himself shush the pair sternly. Keep it down, Inko's sleeping. Sorry, Hicken. Izuku laughed, the camera in his hands, shaking from excitement. The frame rested on Inko. Her eyes opened and she raised one finger to her lips so that her husband wouldn't know she was already awake. Can we see him? Izuku, Tamura scolded lightly from where he stood in front of the hospital issue bassinet. Keep your voice down. The camera quickly moved to look at Hisashi's exhausted face. Is that him? Yes, he could hear his foolish younger self say as they walked over to the bassinet camera zooming in on the newborn. Tamura, Izuku, I want you to meet your nephew, Mikumo Akitani. Giving him Inko's last name, Tamura's voice spoke as the camera zoomed in on the sleeping baby's face. The peaceful face would then scrunch up a little as Izuku ran his fingers came into the frame running over the downy black hair he had inherited from Inko. We both know I'm not too popular for my position on powers these days, Hisashi answered. Inko's last name is safer and thankfully less known. Boys, a tired voice came from the bed as Inko opened her appealing brownish-red eyes fully to look at the brothers. No shop talk? Yes, dear, both Hisashis said together. Most of the UH staff were in the staff room eating their lunch and discussing afternoon classes when Nedzu arrived, followed by Recovery Girl and two other people. Okay, everyone, I need you to listen up, the principal spoke, clapping his paws together. Somewhere on campus, we have a lost child. I'm sure as most can guess that finding him is of the utmost importance. Aizawa slid out of his sleeping bag and stood up. Why is a non-student even on campus? That's a little complicated, I'm Afriad, the principal answered. Looking back at Toshinori and Gran Torino, each spotting a rather impressive-looking red mark on their foreheads from Recovery Girl's cane. We just need to ensure that we secure him before he has a chance to leave campus. Midnight and Hound Dog both have his description. Please ask them for details while I go tell the students that we are practicing a drill. They are to return to their homerooms and await further instructions. Sir, what about his quirk? Present Mike asked, lifting his hand, a small frown of his face. Should we be worried about the little listener attacking us? If you do find Izuku, proceed with caution and observe until backup arrives, Nedzu ordered firmly. He didn't want to think about what could happen if Izuku got scared and lashed out. The best-case scenario was that someone got hurt. Well, the worst was one of the faculty's quirks taken or destroyed. Whatever you do, don't attack. The boy is rather emotional right now, and his quirk might lash out if you're not careful. And where will you be during this dust-up? Snipes spoke, already in the process of swapping his regular ammo out for some tranquilizers. Nedza looked at the nurse. Recovery Girl and I will be in the security room watching the monitors and relaying information to all of you. This is still gonna take forever. I mean, the campus is huge, Midnight said, remembering how small Izuku was and knowing that there were many places he could hide. This could take days, and we can't keep the students here until we find him. Vlad King nodded. We also can't take the chance that he could slip out amongst the student body if we open the gate. Someone cleared their throat, and all eyes turned to the rather tall, sickly-looking blonde man as he raised his hand. I may have a dumb suggestion. Izuku took a deep breath, leaning against the wall, trying to catch his breath. After activating one of all-or-nothing blended abilities and jumping out the window, the curly-haired boy ran as fast and as far away as possible. Much like Hisashi, Izuku also liked taking quirks and combining them together. Though the elder would typically experiment to see what combining two abilities could yield, Izuku preferred more to weave powers together and strengthen them as a whole. His speed, for instance, was actually from combining a few similar powers together until he had finally achieved a working version of something from an old comic book. The only downside was that Izuku couldn't use it for long PRDS without causing strain on his body. Hence why Tamura called the quirk Cheetah. Looking up, the youngest Shigaraki found a massive door in front of him, just open enough that he could sneak inside and hopefully find someplace to hide. Staggering towards the entrance, he slipped inside and found himself in the center of a vast abandoned city. Moving as quickly and quietly as possible, Izuku weaved through several alleys and side streets before ducking into one of the buildings and climbing up to the top floor, finally letting his thoughts catch up. According to Toshinori and Gran, sometime after he had disappeared, Hisashi had gone crazy and forced a quirk on Tamura, becoming some sort of villain. Then he had spent the last 2 centuries hunting down the people who carried Tamura's quirk. Izuku was positive he had sensed Hisashi with pinpoint when he pushed it to its maximum distance. If he was still alive, should Izuku be worried? After so many years apart, was there a chance that his eldest brother could have forgotten all about him? Was it possible that he could attack Izuku like did with Toshi? And where was Inko when the fighting started? Surely the lawyer wouldn't have ever let Hisashi become a criminal without using her telekinesis to drag him back by the ear. Sharp pain suddenly hit Izuku. Inko lying on the floor, Belle on his hands. Tell Hisashi I love him, running. Mikumo-kuken. Izuku gasped and grabbed at the wall, falling to his knees and shaking hands, lifting up to cover his ears as the phantom sound of gunfire rang out. Attention Izuku, please make your way to the nearest robot. Attention Izuku, please make your way to the nearest robot. A loud mechanical voice came from below, snapping Izuku out of his flashback. Peeking over the window ledge, the all-or-nothing user saw 2 long lines of robots coming down the street, breaking off whenever they reached an alleyway or side street. Izuku knew that these must have been the robots Toshinori was talking about before they left, but this was way more than a few. Why the hell would a school need a robot army? Trying to get a closer look, Izuku peeked a little more, noticing that an antenna was blinking on top of each of the robots' heads. It only took him a second too late to realize what it was before one of the robots in front of his hiding spot snapped its head-up camera lens, narrowing in on him. Ducking back down to try and hide, Izuku cursed himself for being so stupid. Of course, a place that could have an army of robots would also outfit them with some sort of tracking program. That alien Nedzu probably had all the bells and whistle on his mechanical henchmen. Hiss, click, click, Izuku, said Alien's voice came over a speaker. I know you're there, these robots are equipped with thermal imaging technology. Izuku rubbed his face with his hands. First killer doors. Then a city that looks like it's waiting for survivors in the zombie apocalypse. Now thermal tracking robots. This is not a FING school, it's military training ground or something. And they still don't have jetpacks. Izuku, Toshinori's voice now came over the speaker. I'm sorry, the thing with your brothers, it's well complicated. Standing up, Izuku wrenched the window open and shouted. You want to talk complicated? Try waking up 200 years in the future and then come talk to me about complicated. Izuku, please come down and let one of our robots see you to the nearest faculty member, Nedzu's voice returned. I'm sure that we can sit down and figure something out over a nice cup of tea. Izuku narrowed his eyes at the robot before lifting one hand and flipping off his no-doubt captive audience. Izuku was a Shigaraki, and Shigarakis never just gave up. They fought until they had nothing left and then went beyond. Just like that one French guy said. Taking off the shirt, Izuku sent a silent apology to the kind detective who gave it to him before he started ripping it into long strips. Glad that he had also taken the tank top, Izuku began wrapping the fabric around his knuckles. This is your last chance, Izuku. Nedzu's voice came sounding a little more annoyed than before. Surrender now, or I will be forced to detain you. Izuku activated all or nothing again and made his way towards the roof, not planning to make it easy for the so-called principal to capture him. Asterisk, 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 holy see, Gran gulped, watching Izuku jam another metal pole into one of the robots. I knew the kid was fast, but this is like watching old videos of myself from my prime. How many does this make? Nedzu asked, looking at power loader, 16 in 10 minutes. The excavation hero gulped as he watched another robot feed go out. This kid, whoever he was, using a combination of speed, power, and surprise attacks to take out robots one after another. I'm sending all one-pointers to ground beta as well as letting the other teachers know where our runaway is. Dear me, the boy is going to exhaust himself if he's not careful. Recover Girl spoke a pad of paper in front of her as she noticed another small cut appear on Izuku's cheek. Kids had training. A new voice came, causing everyone but Nedzu to jump slightly. Turning around, they saw Aizawa standing at the doorway, eyes following Izuku as he ducked into a building, escaping from the street camera. And combat experience. Nedzu, who is he? There is a very high chance that he is the youngest brother of a rather cunning villain, the principal explained. Nedzu, Gran Torino hissed, looking at the newcomer with distrust. Ignoring the glare from the old man, Aizawa looked at the principal seriously. Anyone I would know. The best villains often hide in the shadows, I'm afraid. The principal offered. Aizawa would understand what he meant. Being an underground hero, Eraserhead was no stranger to leaders of criminal organizations keeping their identity hidden. Only the young or foolish purposely went out of their way to make a name for themselves as villains. True villains, the sly and dangerous kind, were smart enough to stay hidden in the shadows, the best of them not leaving even a name behind in pain and suffering they caused. What's this kid saying anyway? Aizawa said, leaning against the console and looking at power loader. Are you able to turn on the robot's microphone from here? Of course. The helmet-clad man nodded, pushing a few buttons. Sahi, you idiot! Izuku screamed, pole vaulting over one of the robots and grabbing onto a fire escape. Using his quirk to increase his speed and the pole he was carrying, he impaled it through the robot's head. Is he yelling at his brothers? All Might asked, noticing that Izuku was breathing hard. Well, of course, he is, Recovery Girl said, fixing the number one hero with a deep frown. You three seem to have forgotten that Izuku is basically 14 and has just found out that his entire family is gone. If he was a normal civilian, none of you would have been so callous in telling him that. Especially you, Gran, you know better. So, he's all alone and grieving, Aizawa said, watching as the boy now called someone named Tamura a moron. The kid then lifted a one-pointer's severed arm up and slammed it back into the robot's body viciously. Looking down at Nedzu, the underground hero frowned. You could almost see the wheels in the principal's head turning. I assume we're taking him in. Excuse me, Gran said, looking at the principal in shock. You can't be serious, after everything his brother did. I had thought about general studies at first. If any lingering members of his brother's empire remain, they could see Izuku as a way of claiming leadership, Nedzu interrupted. The teachers finally arrived and started working with the robots to herd Izuku into an ample open space. Now, I'm wondering if the hero track might be a better choice. I want him, Aizawa said simply. Leave me alone. Izuku yelled at everyone, a bright light suddenly exploding out of his body. Nedzu grabbed the microphone. Everyone, pull back immediately. His quirks going out of control. Aizawa hissed, watching. The boy collapsed onto the concrete, pure electricity shooting off of him. He hit the buildings with enough force to leave damage. Damn it, I knew I should have gone instead of Nemuri. Turning towards the principal, Aizawa's eyes went wide. The sickly-looking man buffed up into all might and took off running. Izuku hugged himself, trying to breathe. After the robots, people in strange outfits showed up and started trying to capture him. One of them was even shooting at him. Fighting robots was one thing, their movements were easy to predict, but humans were another story. And without Hisashi or any sort of backup, Izuku quickly found himself outmatched. The woman from the entrance took a step forward, her hand going to her shoulder, and just Izuku knew he needed to stop her. Go away, he yelled, throwing his hand out, sparks coming off his fingers and gouging deep into the concrete that shot to protect her. Izuku looked at the gashes in shock as he stumbled back, realizing that if the barrier had been 1 second too late, then the woman, he would have... Izuku screamed, falling to the ground and curling up into himself, unaware that his distress was just making things worse. What do we do? Snipe asked, his bullets, already proving ineffective against whatever power the boy was giving off. I should have let Aizawa come instead, Midnight said, moving far back next to ectoplasm. Sorry, guys, I thought this would be a cakewalk with my quirk. Present Mike gave the rated R heroine an encouraging smile. How were you supposed to know the kid was hiding this inside him? Ha! A familiar laugh echoed, All Might landing in front of the teachers and giving a thumbs up. Have no fear, for I am here. All Might. Everyone cried out in relief at the sight of the number one hero. I'm sorry I put you all in danger like this, the number one hero said, looking at the damage to the city before his gaze settled on Izuku. I promise to explain later, but Izuku comes first. He took a step towards the boy, ignoring how his fellow heroes begged him to stay away until Aizawa showed up. But something deep inside of him told Toshinori that Izuku's quirk wouldn't hurt him. A sudden surge of electricity shot towards him like lightning and just barely missing the hero. A voice came from deep within him, saying that no matter what he would be safe, all he needed to do was keep moving forward. Izuku, All Might spoke calmly, kneeling down and placing his hand on Izuku's back, not missing the way he flinched. Izuku, can you hear me? Izuku craned his neck to look up at All Might with a look of pure anguish. Izuku, you need to calm down, All Might said, noticing that he was crying. Izuku shook his head. I can't. Toshi. That woman. I could have she's okay, All Might soothed. Her name is Midnight and she's all right, I promise. I want to go home. Izuku started sobbing, slamming his face and hands into the ground repeatedly. I didn't ask for this, it's not fair. I just want to go home. I'm sorry, Izuku, All Might said, wrapping his arms around the boy to stop him from hurting himself more. I'm so sorry. Like a demon breaking, Izuku latched onto Toshinori and allowed all his grief to come rushing out. Tears poured from his eyes for several long minutes as he begged the hero over and over again to take him home. Eventually, the light faded and disappeared entirely, leaving only All Might behind holding the exhausted Izuku, no smile found anywhere on his face. Izuku wandered aimlessly, unable to hear or see anything amidst the endless void that surrounded him. All he could do was continue forward and hope to find something or perhaps someone that could help him. Drip, drip. Stopping suddenly at the noise, Izuku listened very carefully, trying to locate the distant sound source. Standing very still and holding his breath, Izuku concentrated. Drip, drip. Heading to what he believed was the source of the noise, all Izuku could do was hope that his mind wasn't playing tricks on him. Unaware how long he had been running, Izuku suddenly stopped and stared ahead at what appeared to be a sea of fragile-looking strings. Moving closer to the strings, something deep inside Izuku told him not to break any of them. So very carefully, he weaved his way through them, noting that some of the strings appeared to be woven together. Unbeknownst to Izuku was the flowers that sprung up from the ground from his footsteps as he examined the strings more closely. Each string was unique in size and color. Some even had patterns on them, though those were hard to see. Some were alone, while others were woven together with other strings, had their colors bleeding together wherever they touched, creating new shades of color. Izuku stopped his examination of one particular complex-looking braid and looked around. He knew that voice. Zuku. Moving as carefully as possible, Izuku let himself be drawn to one particular string near the heart of all of them. It was a strong-looking black string that seemed to glitter with a soft pink light. Izuku looked at it and saw the source of the noise he heard was coming off this string. It was as though the string was crying. Inko's string was crying, but why? Izuku wasn't sure how, but he knew, he was sure this string was Inko's power to attract small objects. This meant that all those other strings were the powers Izuku had taken or given when he worked with his siblings running the underground. But if Izuku had Inko's power, that would mean bang death to all you freaks. Izuku covered his ears, trying to block out the sound. Something about that voice terrified him. We'll be best friends forever, right, Izuku? Izuku felt like he was going to throw up when two hands took hold of his shoulders, and everything melted away. Izuku, Inko's soft voice came. Trying to turn around, Izuku was held firmly in place by his beloved sister-in-law's firm grip. Please, don't look at me. Inko, he said, tears coming to his eyes at her voice. He hadn't realized just how much he had missed her, missed everyone until just this second. I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry. Inko spoke, her head coming to rest softly on Izuku's shoulders, dark strands appearing in the corner of Izuku's eyes. You have to find Hisashi. Please, Izuku, you have to keep your promise. Not caring about what she said before, Izuku turned around. In dash, the boy's voice caught in his throat and quickly morphed into a loud scream of terror. Inko stood in front of him, her once appealing white dress stained bright red from her blood that flowed from the large hole on her teeth. Aizawa sat there quietly, watching. When the principal's mysterious guest, who he later learned was named Izuku, had started twitching, the underground hero had been tempted to get Recovery Girl. Still, he knew that the woman would no doubt chase him out of the room. Not to mention how All Might would react. The #1 hero had practically slept next to the boy's bed for the past couple of days. Even the old man, Gran Torino, would come without fail numerous times during the day to check up on Izuku. Netsu told them that Izuku was related to a very powerful criminal that had a history with the two men but failed to mention a name or alias. And from what All Might had told them later, Izuku helped his brother in his work. Aizawa had been suspicious at that. How could someone not realize they were working for a villain? Plus, the boy had nearly killed Midnight. There was no way he was going to take any chances before Shoyuta first got a red on Izuku himself. With a quick gasp, Izuku's eyes snapped open, and he sat up, breathing hard, face pale, looking like he was going to be sick. With practiced ease, Aizawa picked up the trash bin next to the bed and held it out to Izuku, who flinched at the sight of his audience but still accepted it with a quiet thank you. You want some water, kid? The underground hero asked, pouring some into a glass. Wise, please, Izuku said, holding a shaky hand and accepting the water, taking small sips as he studied the exhausted man in the chair. You're in the infirmary, Aizawa stated, already knowing what the boy was going to ask. Private room, since you broke one of the windows in the main room. Izuku flushed in embarrassment. Oh, sorry. Crossing his arms over his Aizawa stared at Izuku. Don't apologize to me, it's Recovery Girl you should be saying sorry to. Alright, Izuku stuttered, looking uncomfortable as he fiddled with the cup lid before looking up at Aizawa. Who are you? I'm Shoyuta Aizawa. I teach one of the hero classes here at Yuye, Shoyuta explained, noticing that a strange look came to Izuku's face. He pulled out his license and passed it to Izuku, watching as the curly-haired boy examined it with open curiosity. As you can see, I'm a certified hero, though I do mostly underground stuff. Yuei. Is that what this place is called? Izuku said, tracing the gold letters on the black protective sleeve. A few minutes passed as Aizawa stared at the kid like he had grown a second head. Had he really never heard of Yuei before? Kid, he said, leaning forward with a stern look. Do you understand what's happening right now? Izuku looked startled at the question. I know that Toshinori brought me here. The detective from last night wanted me examined by some doctors, Izuku said, unaware he had been sleeping for so long. And I got upset because Gran said, my brother. Tears suddenly formed in Izuku's eyes and quickly fell onto the blankets. The boy remembered that Hisashi had become a villain, that Tamura was dead, and Inko, bright red BLD flowed freely from between Izuku's fingers as he pressed down as hard as he could, feeling sick again. Izuku grabbed the waste bin and started throwing up what little he had in his stomach. Aizawa observed, trying to determine whether this was an act but couldn't find any signs of deceit. Lifting his hand, the teacher placed one hand on Izuku's back, rubbing it in the same soothing way he did when Hisashi was hungover. When Izuku was done, Shoyuta removed the waste bin, replacing it with another cup of water. Is there anyone we can call? Aizawa asked while Izuku took a sip of water. Maybe your parents? Izuku gave a short bark of laughter and looked at Aizawa with dead green eyes, familiar eyes. My parents have been dead a long time, it was just my brothers and me. Aizawa frowned. If you don't mind me asking, the underground hero wondering if perhaps there was some extended family for the boy to stay with instead. What happened to them? Izuku put the cup back on the table next to the bed. Mother died having me. I'm sorry for your loss. It's fine, Izuku dismissed, drawing his knees up and resting his head on them. Hisashi said she wasn't a nice person. More interested in partying and flaunting our wealth than in her children. She hated my brothers, and she would have aborted me if someone hadn't leaked her PR dncy to the press. Aizawa frowned deeply. What about your father? Father was, Izuku trailed off, curled tighter into himself. He remembered very few things about his biological father, and none of them were good. Just the man's cold eyes and cruel words whenever he punished one of them. He was mean. I don't want to talk about him. All right then, Aizawa said, knowing pushing would only cause Izuku to retreat further into himself. How old were you all when he died? There must be someone we can call for you. Izuku shook his head. My parents were only children, and I never knew my grandparents. That's why the courts let Hisashi take care of us. And how old was he? Izuku didn't say anything. He just looked at Aizawa suspiciously. Hisashi was 18, Tamura was 16, and I was 5. That's a big age gap. I take it then that your brothers raised you by themselves. The underground hero nodded now, understanding a little more. Acting as a backup on a few cases with child services, Shoyuta had seen more than his share of elder siblings getting custody of their little brothers and sisters. The foster system didn't have the best reputation, so kids either had to grow up fast or be separated. Izuku hummed in agreement, his face completely blank. Shoyuta suddenly knew where he had seen that face before. It started back at him from the mirror a lot when he was a student. When Shirakumo died, it was like he and Hisashi lost a piece of themselves. But they could still talk to each other or Namuri whenever things got too hard. Who could Izuku talk to? The boy was all alone as far as Shoyuta could see, although there was clearly something between the boy and All Might. And after eavesdropping, Aizawa knew there was considerable debate over who would take custody of the child. Shoyuta was a certified foster parent even though he had never put it into use. If nobody stepped up soon perhaps, he could offer to take Izuku in. Of course, he would have to talk things over with Hisashi first and make sure that Izuku didn't have a problem with cats before anything else. You should get some more sleep, kid, Aizawa said, noticing that the boy's eyes kept dropping. Izuku looked at the dark-haired man. For some reason, Aizawa reminded him of Hisashi with his attitude and slovenly appearance. The eldest Shigaraki was secretly a hardcore workaholic, and if no one reminded him to eat, shower, or sleep, Hisashi simply forgot. Laying down, Izuku felt his eyelids grow heavy, feeling as he felt the covers be pulled up over his shoulders. Hisashi would do the same thing whenever he caught Izuku studied too late in the library. Waiting for a few moments, Aizawa stood up and was planning to clean up when a hand shot out, grabbing him. Following it towards the bed, he saw Izuku half sitting up, looking at him with terrified eyes. "I'm sorry," the boy stammered, immediately withdrawing his hand like it burned. Aizawa looked blankly at him for a second, waiting. Izuku made a small distressed noise, grabbing the blankets and laying down, completely covering himself with them. Shoyuta stood there watching as the blankets trembled and made quick work of the waste bin and discarded cups. Once he was down, he sat back in the chair and opened his bag, pulling out one of Vlad's students' tests and a red pen to start grading. Eventually, the trembling stopped, as Izuku fell back asleep, lulled there by the familiar sounds of pen on paper. Toshinori found himself standing alone in the center of an enormous garden. Glancing around, the blonde noted that the garden seemed to go on forever. In the distance, there was a house that looked like a Western-styled mansion. Walking over to a bed of flowers, Toshinori crouched down, reaching out and making contact with their soft-looking petals. "Brother," a familiar voice rang out just as the blonde leaned down to sniff some of the flowers. Standing up, the hero saw Izuku running towards him, a massive smile on his face as he waved a paper. Toshinori was about to greet Izuku when the boy ran through him harmlessly, passing through the number one hero's body as though he were a ghost. Turning around, Toshinori saw the excited Izuku stopping in front of a table where a man was sitting. Toshinori knew wasn't always the most observant of men, but that the table certainly hadn't been there a second ago. "Look, Rakchan," Izuku said, slamming the paper on the table with a proud look. "I got in." The man picked up the paper, a few loose strands of white hair falling from his small ponytail. Even though the hair blocking the upper half of his face, Toshinori knew instinctually who he was. The first user of One for All. All for One and Izuku's brother, Tamura Shigaraki. "I can see that," the pale-haired man spoke, hand coming up to ruffle Izuku's hair, giving him a soft smile. "My baby brother, not even 13 yet and already going off to college. Makes me feel old, wouldn't you agree, Hisashi?" "Bah," a familiar voice came out from behind Toshinori. "Freeze up. Do you hear that, Inko, us old? Why, you're still as appealing and lively as the day I met you. And don't you forget it," a female voice joined. Turning around, Toshinori saw his nemesis All for One standing there, one arms wrapped around the waist of her appealing woman who carried a baby in her arms. The man only looking a little younger than he had when they battled 5 years prior. Toshinori watched closely as the future symbol of evil wrapped his arm around Izuku's neck and started giving him a nagi. The number one hero had seen All for One smile plenty of times. They were often cold, cruel, and most often murderous. But this All for One seemed happy. The woman who had come with All for One laughed, her eyes lighting up in pure joy as the baby in her arms stopped his attempts at playing with her long black hair to join in on the laughter with his own. "Hisashi, come hold your son," the woman said, kissing the baby's cheek before handing him to his father. The child squealed in joy in his father's arms and immediately latched his hands onto All for One's cheeks. This earned a peal of laughter from the man in return as his smile was stretched by the child's chubby fingers. "I'm so proud of you, Izuku," the woman said, pulling the boy into a hug. "You worked so hard for this." Toshinori watched the scene as the One for All started pouring tea into some cups. The small family began talking about the courses Izuku was thinking of taking and where he would live. The blonde was so caught up watching that he didn't even notice someone coming to stand next to him. "It's nice, isn't it?" a tired voice spoke as another version of Tamura came to stand next to the hero, smiling sadly at the scene before them. "I think I missed these ordinary days with them more than anything else." Toshinori gaped and studied the man beside him. This version of Tamura, unlike the one sitting, looked sicker and more exhausted than his counterpart. His hair was loose and wild, and his face reminded Toshinori of his own, with the same sunken eyes and gaunt cheeks. This was most likely what the first user of One for All looked like before he passed the quirk along. First user. Tamura, the hero said cautiously, coughing slightly as bright green eyes, the same shade as Izuku's he realized, looked at him. How am I talking to you like this? Is it because of Izuku? Am I weaker than I thought? Please, I need more tea. Tashinori, the man greeted, hand lifting up to rub the blonde's hair like Tashinori had seen him do with Izuku. Thank you. The number one hero felt kinda embarrassed having his head pat like when he was a child. But I haven't done anything. You found my baby brother, Tamura spoke softly, looking back to the table where Izuku was now making silly faces at the baby, much to the boy's delight. Please keep him safe. If Hisashi finds him, I fear history will repeat. Repeat? Tashinori echoed, looking confused. I don't understand. After what happened to them, Hisashi's anger spiraled out of control. Tamura said, form starting to fade away along with the rest of the landscape. He was so afraid of losing me next to. I tried my best to help him, but neither of us could have predicted what happened. Wait, Tashinori yelled, reaching out as everything started to go dark. I don't understand. What happened? A hand grabbed onto the hero's wrist, one covered in a bright yellow glove. Tashinori. The man said, turning around and seeing Nana just as young and appealing as the day he met her. Nana looked like she was trying to say something to him, but no words came from her mouth as the dark fog started to swallow her body. Behind Nana stood the shadows of 6 other people, each staring at Tashinori as he called out, reaching for his teacher. Nana! Tashinori gasped, sitting up on his bed, hand reaching out in front of him where Nana should have been only finding air. Staring at the empty spot for a few more moments, the hero sighed and pushed the covers off himself. Standing up, and Tashinori looked at his alarm, noticing it was sometime in early hours of the morning. Stretching and ignoring the constant pain in his side, Tashinori decided to get up and made his way to the kitchen to make himself some tea, glancing at the couch and finding Izuku gone. Gasping slightly, the blonde felt some blood escape his mouth. Tearing through the apartment, the hero started looking for Izuku, thankful that Gran Torino had finally agreed to go home the day before. Things had been tense, to say the least, while he was staying here. Gran had taken to camping out in Tashinori's guest/gift room, studying Izuku's every move like a powder keg waiting to explode. Mercifully, after the talk recovery girl had with the jet hero, Gran didn't seem interested in lighting the fuse. If the retired hero knew that Izuku was missing, he would undoubtedly go into a frenzy, bouncing between the boy running away or going out to search for All for One. Hearing that his nemesis was alive, everyone at U8 who knew about his existence, who knew what All for One had been doing these last 5 years, while the select few who knew about his existence thought him dead. And yes, Tashinori was scared, but maybe deep down inside, he already knew that All for One wasn't dead. Perhaps deep down inside One for All's core, there was still a connection, no matter how small and strained by blood and fighting, that connected Tamura to his brother. Just like how it connected with Izuku through Tashinori, or how the boy knew his eldest brother was alive. If that was the case, then what were these quirks really? Something that connected the brothers together across time and people, or something more? Tashinori shook his head as he finished looking through all the rooms and still unable to find Izuku, grabbing his cell phone, ready to call Tsukachi. As his finger hovered over the detective's contact, the balcony door slid open, and Izuku walked in, closing the door quietly behind him. There you are, the blonde exclaimed, causing the boy to jump and nearly drop his new laptop. A gift from Nedzu, who was tutoring the boy personally, since any decent school in the area would require his school records. Good morning, Izuku said flatly, walking over to the coffee table and plugging the laptop in to charge. I'll just be a moment, and then I'll start on making breakfast. Tashinori looked at the deep circles under the boy's eyes and knew Izuku had barely slept again, knowing he needed that new apartment for them as soon as possible. Since taking Izuku in, the boy would often stay up late doing who knows what on the computer. He barely slept more than a couple hours on the couch before Tashinori walked him to U8. Izuku would spend most of the day being tutored by Nedzu. The principal told Tashinori that Izuku was a quiet but diligent worker. It was clear to everyone that Izuku was distracting himself from his grief by throwing his attention into schoolwork instead of trying to catch up on the last 200 years. And he was also absorbing whatever information was thrown at him by the principal at a startling rate. If Tashinori's dream was right, the boy had been accepted into college at 13, he was a prodigy. Perhaps Tashinori should suggest to Nezu that they give Izuku an IQ test when finished catching up. His mental state though worried Recovery Girl and everyone else the most. Izuku had barely cried about the loss of his family. In fact, he hardly showed emotion since he woke up after the incident in Ground Beta. Aizawa shoved his phone number into Tashinori's hand, hair floating as the underground hero's red eyes glared into him. Izuku's parents were not the nicest of people, and his brothers were all he had. After that vision, Tashinori finally started to comprehend exactly what Izuku had lost. "Izuku," Tashinori said, watching as Izuku moved around the kitchen like a robot, pausing in his task of pouring the tea to look at the blonde. "Let me make breakfast this morning. Why don't you get some sleep?" Izuku turned around, pouring the hot water from the kettle into the teapot where it could steep a frown on his lips. "I'm fine." "But I said I'm fine," Izuku yelled, slamming the metal kettle back down on the counter before gasping surprise and looking at Tashinori with wide eyes. "I'm sorry, Toshi. Maybe you're right, I just need some sleep. I'm tired and need to sleep, then I'll be okay. Everything will be okay once I get some sleep." The hero watched the boy make his way to the couch, mumbling all the way. He pulled the blankets over himself, listening as the mumbling slowly stopped before he pulled out his phone. "Small Might number 1, we won't be able to make it today." Tashinori had barely put the phone on the counter when it dinged. Seriously, did Nezu ever sleep? "Harbinger of Chaos, thank you for letting me know. Should I send Arjeet over?" "Small Might number 1, no thank you. Small Might number 1, no worse than normal. Harbinger of Chaos, bad day." "Small Might number 1, bad day." The principal sent Tashinori a final good luck text before tapping the phone to his chin for a few moments before he pulled up his newest contact. "Small Might number 1, can we talk?" 3 dots hovered almost immediately after he sent the message. It seems the underground hero slept as much as Nezu did. "Cat Dadziwa, when and where?" Tashinori sent the location of a local all-night coffee shop that shouldn't be too busy this early. Heading to his room to get dressed, making sure to write Izuku a note and leave it on the coffee table before silently walking out of the apartment. Tashinori sat nervously at the back booth waiting for Aizawa to show. It had been over 20 minutes since the number 1 hero had arrived and sat down waiting, and now he was starting to get nervous. What would Izuku do if he woke up? What? Would he believe the note? "Aji." Gran Torino had told Tashinori to watch the boy close when he left. "What if—" "Hey Yagi, can you hear me?" an exhausted voice asked, pulling the number 1 hero from his anxious thoughts. Aizawa appeared in front of the Tashinori, one eyebrow raised as he stood across from him. "Sorry I'm late. I had to make a stop at my agency." Tashinori gave a nervous smile, still unsure how to act around the underground hero. Aizawa had barely batted an eyebrow when Nezu had explained about Tashinori's injury. Fingers nervously played with the cup of water a waitress had given Tashinori when he sat down. "I'm the one who should be apologizing to you. I forgot that you're a night owl," the blonde gasped slightly, looking at Aizawa. "Oh, and you probably have to get to school in a couple of hours. Maybe we should postpone. Sit," the underground hero ordered, pointing at Tashinori as he started standing up. Fearing the dark look in Aizawa's eyes, they reminded Tashinori of Gran Torino's. Tashinori did as he was told and sat back down. Aizawa sat there studying him for a moment, taking a sip of the coffee the waitress brought him before starting. "Are you always this nervous when you aren't working?" Tashinori, taken aback by the question, chuckled and rubbed the back of his head. "I'm sure you can understand this form isn't the most inspirational one." "Maybe for the cameras," Aizawa hummed, turning to the waitress who appeared again, placing an order for some food. As the woman walked away, Aizawa opened up the bag he had stopped to get from his agency, pulling out a thick pile of papers, sliding them over to the number 1. "For the record, though, I think as long as you're capable of doing what we do." "Screw what you look like." Tashinori felt himself smile in relief at those words. Of the small group of doctors that knew of All Mights, Most of them gave Toshinori pitying looks when he went in for his regular checkups. Even David, one of Toshinori's best friends, would give this unreadable look sometimes on their video chats. Taking the papers, Toshinori started reading them, trying to understand what he was looking at. It looked like searches typed in and screenshots of websites, but why would Nezu think this was? Then, like a bolt of lightning, the hero realized what he was looking at. This what Izuku has been doing on the computer, Toshinori said, looking at one particular page where everyone with the surname Shigaraki was listed. Nezu put spyware in it? Aizawa took a sip of his coffee, leaning back. Sort of. The laptop he was given is actually U8's property given to students who have financial problems to help with their schoolwork. Whatever website he uses it for is logged and sent to the mainframe. Nezu had PowerLoader set it up to make sure that students were actually using the laptops for their given purpose. And this is all of Izuku's? Toshinori asked, looking at the large stack with wide eyes. The underground hero snorted. Hardly, this is just last night. Nezu emailed it to me, and I printed it off at my agency before coming. Toshinori coughed at the news, quickly pulling out his handkerchief to collect any stray BLD that might escape from his mouth. It was no wonder Izuku looked so terrible this morning if this is what he was doing all night. Frowning, the number 1 hero gripped the pages tighter, knowing he had to do something about this as soon as possible before the boy ran himself into the ground, or worse. I like that look, Aizawa's voice pipped up, drawing the blonde away from his thoughts. Toshinori looked confused. I'm sorry. Aizawa placed the mug back on the table. If you had brushed this off, I would have had Nezu immediately take the kid from you and put him in my custody. Toshinori clenched his teeth as the underground hero continued. But you genuinely seem to care for the kid despite what Nezu told me his brother put you through. Nezu told you about him? Toshinori asked, looking baffled. No doubt the abridged version. The underground hero shrugged, reached back into his bag to pull out a smaller bunch of papers held together by a single paperclip. Can you take a day or two off from work? Toshinori nodded. If you tell me when I can defiantly take time off. Does today work? Mentally going over his schedule, Toshinori knew that All Might didn't have anything that couldn't be rescheduled and nodded. Good, the underground hero said, handing over the paper he had been holding. Get Izuku ready and meet me at the train station. The 3 of us are going on a trip. To where? Toshinori asked, taking the paper. Aizawa slides out of the booth, putting some money down as he got up. Toshinori looked like he wanted to say something. Still, Aizawa was too quick, already out the door, grabbing his food from the waitress before the number 1 hero realized what had happened. Slouching down, Toshinori lifted up one of the stacks of paper Aizawa had left behind. An old article that showed a picture of a very wealthy-looking mansion in one corner, in particular, catching the number 1 hero's eye. The Akatani group. Toshinori felt a slight chill run up his spine, knowing exactly who the group was and what sort of influence they had. Paying his half of the check, Toshinori headed home to tell Izuku about their sudden trip, a nagging feeling following him the entire way. The hero barely even heard the door chimes sound as an ashen-haired male in a black hoodie made his way inside the coffee shop. Tamura had told Kurogiri he was coming to Mizudafu to do some recon on Yue, and well, that was partially true. He also just needed to get away for a moment. Sensei had been acting strangely. At first, Tamura barely noticed. That creepy doctor always insisted that Sensei stay away from germs as possible because of his injuries. It didn't stop Tamura from making Kurogiri to take him to see Sensei whenever he wanted to, though. But lately, Sensei had been doing something. The last few times Tamura had Kurogiri warp them to Sensei, he had heard the man talking to himself. When he had first gotten hurt, the doctor did say it could take years for some of the damage to make itself known. Could this be some late damage from Sensei's injury presenting itself? Tamura's fingers tightened over the glass of water the waiter had brought him. This was All Might's fault, everything was. The first opportunity Tamura had, he would murder the so-called symbol of peace in the bloodiest and cruelest way possible. But first thing was first, recon, and maybe breakfast. Are you gonna throw me in prison? Izuku asked, placing one of his cards down. Gran Torino cussed and threw his own in the air, having lost their 10th game of Uno. No, Aizawa said, putting his cards down and gathering all the cards again for another game. Kill me and throw my body into the ocean? Toshinori coughed BLD, escaping his mouth as he looked at Izuku in horror. What? Why would you think that? Izuku shrugged, picking up his cards. 'Cause well you know him? The boy pointed at Gran Torino, now in full hero costume, as the old man glared at him from over the Uno cards. Hey! Torino growled, looking at the boy and slamming one card onto the table. I said I was sorry. Izuku snorted in disbelief, still not having forgiven the man for what had happened. It certainly didn't help Gran's case that he had stuck to the youngest Shigaraki's side like glue the entire time he stayed at Toshinori's apartment. The only time Izuku got a break was when he was learning with Nedzu or had snuck out onto the balcony to do research at night. Toshinori put his cards against his tea and opened his mouth. A phone call is here, a phone call here, a phone call is here. The number one hero jumped in surprise as his ringtone rang out. Well, everyone raised an eyebrow at it. Grabbing the phone from his pocket, Toshinori gulped when he saw the name on the call screen. Sir Knight. I'm sorry, guys. The blonde grinned weakly, standing up. I have to take this. The trio watched him walk away quietly, Izuku staring at Gran Torino. What? Just? I've seen your phone. It's all new and shiny. Izuku spoke, picking his cards, the barest hint of a smile on his face. So why the hell does Toshi have one that's older than me? Gran stared at the boy for a second before he grinned evilly and started telling the story behind Toshinori and Flip's phones. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Hello, Sasaki. All Might, the man greeted coolly on the other end. You haven't called me to make the arrangements, so I am now forced to call you. Arrangements? Toshinori repeated. What arrangements? Night Eye huffed on the other end of the line. To pass along one for all to Mirio. What else would I be talking about? Sasaki, Toshinori spoke seriously. The hero had already talked to Torino this to get his mentor's own thoughts on Mirio Togata. Both of them surprisingly coming to the same conclusion. I'm not giving it to him. What? But why? Night Eye bellowed, the faintest thud heard in the background. He's perfect. Mirio already has a powerful quirk, and he's so much like you that he would make the perfect symbol of peace. You're right, he is, Toshinori said, watching the countryside fly by him as he stared out the window. Which is why he doesn't need my power. Young Togata will do amazing things as a hero, and one day he'll earn the title as the number one on his own merit. It was true. From the moment Toshinori saw Lemillion's file, he knew the boy would be something great. Togata had the power and charisma to become a top hero, perhaps even faster than Hawks had. But if Toshinori gave him one for all, then no way would happen. If Izuku was right about his eldest brothers still being out there, then Togata would get caught up in the endless battle and never reach his full potential. Whether All for One was still alive or had somehow figured out a way to pass his own quirk along, Toshinori couldn't say. He just knew that his battle with the symbol of evil wasn't over yet. All Might, and there was something else Toshinori needed to do along with finding a successor for One for All. He needed to help the next generation of heroes not make the same mistakes the current ones had. After Toshinori's brush with death, he realized that there needed to be heroes around to pick up the slack if the worst happened. It's not that Endeavor and the others weren't good at their jobs, but crime had nearly tripled while Toshinori was on forced bed rest. No one was cooperating with each other as they should have been. All Might was supposed to be the symbol of peace that inspired everyone to be better. To make villains think twice before they committed a crime. Instead, he had unknowingly made people too dependent on him. What's the point in pushing yourself to be better when All Might can do it for you? It was a bitter realization for Toshinori to swallow. All Might, being a teacher at U, now served a second purpose. Toshinori would search for his successor and lay the groundwork for the next generation of heroes to work together better. Well, they were still students. Toshinori. Jumping, the blonde nearly dropped the phone in shock, laughing nervously, knowing precisely what face Night Eye was currently making. Sorry, I got lost in thought. What were you saying? I said, Night Eye replied, no doubt grinding his teeth. If you've already found a candidate, then just tell me. We can meet up, and I can evaluate them for you to see that Mirio is clearly the superior choice. Hopefully, you haven't passed on OFA yet, but if you have, it shouldn't be too much of a bother for them pass it along to the right person. Found his successor. Toshinori thought the image of Izuku's smiling face popping into his head for some reason. The hero shook his head. I haven't found one yet. Then what's the problem? Night I asked. Toshinori said, suddenly wondering what was holding him back. Netsu had told him that he could look through the rest of the hero students' files if Toshinori wanted. Not to mention that someone in Gen Ed and support courses could also be a viable candidate given the right training. If no one caught his eye, in the upcoming new hero students Toshinori would look at the other courses. The number one wasn't out of options just yet, even though his time was growing closer with every passing day. I just need to make this decision myself, Toshinori answered, wondering if Nana had ever felt this weight also. I appreciate your trying to help, but this is something I need to do myself. Fine, Night I said, hanging up, leaving Toshinori to listen to the dial tone. The blonde stayed like that for a while, rubbing the phone bridge to try and fight off the oncoming headache that was quickly making its presence known. Once, Toshinori made his way back to the group, surprised to hear soft laughter coming from Izuku as he sat back down. And the poor president stood there looking at her empty hand. Was this idiot's new phone sank to the bottom of the sea? Ack, the hero gasped, some BLD spilling out of his mouth as he realized what story Gran Torino had been telling the pair. What are you doing? Raise? Gran Torino snickered, throwing some candy into a pile, his Uno cards now replaced with regular playing cards. Telling these two why you have to buy flip phones in bulk. I have to say that I never expected the number one hero to be so bad with technology, Aizawa hummed carefully. Sliding more candy into the pile, his eyes staring at Izuku with suspicion. Raise. Did you seriously think a bomb was on that phone? Izuku patted Toshinori's hand, laying his cards down on the table. Read M and weep, gentlemen. Damn it, Torino growled, slamming his hands on the table in frustration. Who the hell taught you how to play cards? Was it that brother of yours? Izuku hummed, passing a red lollipop to the blonde as he grabbed a yellow one for himself. Rakchan got bored in the hospital. Cards were really the only thing we could play to pass the time, and it helped that Hicken has a terrible poker face. Bullshit, Gran Torino said, standing up on his seat. It was still weird hearing All for One being called such a childish name, but he had a horrible poker face. That was just ridiculous. I call bullshit. Izuku SED on his own lollipop and shook his head. No, seriously, he does. I remember this one time. Toshinori settles back into his seat, listening to Izuku tell them a story about his brothers happily skiing on his treat. The conversation he had with Sir Night Eye quickly fading from his mind. Asterisk. Night Eye slammed the phone back down, burning anger coursing through his veins as he opened the desk drawer next to him and was greeted by a blurry picture. The photo came courtesy of Mirio's classmate Hado's cell phone. Hence, the quality wasn't the greatest, but it still clearly showed All Might holding someone in his arms. Not smiling, Mirio had asked for it because he knew how much of an All Might fan Night Eye was not unaware of the storm he was unleashing when he handed it over. According to Mirai's investigations, no new transfer students had been enrolled in UA, so whoever this was, they clearly weren't a student. Yet something was going on, and Mirai would get to the bottom of it. Knock, quickly putting the photo away, Night Eye straightened his suit, sat up straight. Enter. The door creaked open, and Mirio's head peeked in, face lighting up as soon as their eyes met. Good afternoon, sir. I was just about to leave on patrol with Centipeder but thought I would bring you some tea before we left. How kind of you, Night Eye nodded gratefully, looking at his pile of paperwork. Thank you, Mirio, I appreciate it. You're welcome, Mirio said, placing the cup on the desk, giving a salute and turning to walk away. Well, then I'll be off. Sir Night Eye drummed his fingers slightly. Mirio, just a moment. The hero paused and turned around, looking at the man. Yes, sir. Has anything strange been happening at school lately? Mirai asked. Anything at all? Mirio looked puzzled for a moment, already knowing that this probably had to do with the picture of All Might he had given Sir. Thinking about the last couple of weeks, there was one thing that stood out in his mind more than the rest. Actually, there is one thing, Mirio said, remembering the determined look on Hato's face as she ran off down the halls every lunch hour. Nijire heard from someone that Principal Nedzu recently took on a student. She's been trying to find them, but so far hasn't had any luck. Mirio smiled and rubbed the back of his head. It's really been driving her nuts, so Tamaki and I thought we would help her out. 6 eyes are better than 2 after all. I see, Night Eye said, wondering what the chances were that Nedzu's new student could be the person from the photo. If you find them, let me know. Yes, sir, Mirio said again, leaving Night Eye alone with his thoughts. Trying not to let his mind drift away with him, the hero grabbed the full file from the pile, the words Shai Hasaikai printed clearly on the front. Taking a sip of his tea and leaning back, Mirai started reading over the information on the Yakuza's leader Kai Chisaki. As they walked through the station, everyone stopped to point and whisper at the strange group. In front was a small old man dressed up like a hero who demanded that an extraordinarily tall and sickly-looking fellow find the closest taiyaki stand. Trailing behind them was a homeless man pulling a struggling child wrapped in some sort of tape. A shrill whistle broke everyone free of their gossiping as the numerous railway personnel made their way over. Stop right there, one man in a bright vest yelled, waving a flashing baton. All of you are coming with me. The 3 adults just looked at each and shrugged, following the officers without question. Though Aizawa did have to activate his quirk when a few men tried to pull his capture scarf off Izuku. The floating hair and red eyes displayed scared the men enough that without a word they carried him the rest of the way. As soon as everyone was sitting comfortably, the same man who ordered them into the office started to talk again. Who are you people? Why is this boy tied up? What business do you have in Nabu? Ah, Aizawa said, reaching into his belt and pulling out his license, showing it to the man. Sorry about that. I'm a hero, and this boy here is a witness to a case. As you can, he's not very cooperative. Izuku's muffled curses came from beneath the capture material as he renewed struggling. Aizawa flashed the boy with his quirk. Stay. And where is his guardian? The man asked, handing the license back to the hero with suspicion clear in his eyes. He's clearly a minor. Aizawa moved his thumb at Toshinori. This guy here is looking after him. The man now turned his attention towards the deflated form of the number 1 hero. Is this true? You see, Toshinori said, giving an awkward smile as he scratched his neck. We're sorry about the commotion. You see, it was either this or risk him jumping out of the train. Gran Torino groaned, running his hand over his face, and jumped in front of Toshinori before he could say anything else. Nana was probably rolling over in her grave laughing right now, watching her apprentice struggle right now. Listen, the short version is the kid saw something pretty nasty. We need to hide him for a couple of days. Your town seemed like as good a place as any. How can I be sure, Cause All Might wouldn't have sent us here if he didn't think that, Gran Torino smirked, noticing a twinkle appear in the man's eyes. Honestly, sometimes it was too easy, and a little concerning, that you just had to drop the right name and you could get away with pretty much anything. He personally asked us to bring the kid here since your town has such a great reputation. A pride-filled look made its way to the man's face. Well, he's right, a few bad apples here and there. But Nabu is virtually crime-free. So, then it's okay that we stay here a few days and hide out, Gran Torino continued, smooth-talking the man. You know, for the kid's sake. I mean, it would really mean a lot to All Might, Gran smirked, looking at Toshinori, who felt himself start to shake with fear. He might even come to pick us up personally before we leave just to say thanks. Okay, the man instantly agreed, acting like a giddy schoolgirl. The rest of the way to their hotel was a much easier trip now that they had a police SU. The workers at the inn barely even bat an eyelash at Izuku's restrained form, probably having already received a call about their unusual guests from the station. As soon as everyone was safely inside, Aizawa loosened just enough of his capture weapon. Blah, Izuku spat, trying to get some of the fabric out of his mouth. Do you ever wash that thing? Yes, Aizawa answered, tightening the material again. Now, are you going to behave, or will we have to carry you around this entire trip? Izuku's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't? The underground hero gave a sadistic grin. Try me. Tashinori cleared his throat trying to steer the conversation back on track. Look Izuku, I'm sorry we lied but would you have come any other way? Gran Torino interrupted, pulling his cape off. The moment you heard the conductor over the loudspeaker, you practically jumped out the window. Gee, I wonder why, Izuku snidely replied. Maybe because I don't. But why? Tashinori asked, kneeling down in front of the boy. I've seen your search history. You were researching this town, why would you do that if you didn't plan on coming? And what's your connection to the Akatani group? Aizawa inquired. Everyone had heard of the Akatani group. They were one of the biggest and most prominent non-profit organizations in Japan. Rumor was that they were founded when quirks first began by a group of powerful and rich individuals. These individuals had wanted to help people like them since they themselves were unable to come out to the public about their abilities. They also single-handedly ran one of the biggest quirkless support networks in Japan. In a society driven by quirks, they helped those without fine jobs and helped provide the well-needed support that was sadly lacking. And never once had they ever been embroiled in any sort of grave scandal. The mysterious group behind the organization was actually known for turning in people complete with evidence whenever someone used their resources to commit a crime. Shoyuta himself, having personally arrested a human trafficker who used a children's tutoring program to scout out potential victims. Does this have to do with your brother? Tashinori asked, shivering when acidic eyes pinned him down. So what if it does? Izuku hissed. It's been 200 years. I doubt Hisashi even remembers me. Activating all or nothing, Izuku called on Plump, increasing his body just enough that this time when Aizawa erased his quirk, he was able to slip free of his bindings and escape out a window the staff had left open. Before either Tashinori or Gran Torino could go after Izuku, though Aizawa erased their quirks. Red eyes narrowed dangerously as he pinned both the men down with a single look. You two explain, the underground hero hissed. What did he mean by 200 years? It didn't take long for Izuku to get lost in New Naboo. The Naboo from 200 years ago had been a good-sized city for the Shigaraki family to vacation at. But it had looked like as time moved forward, the city grew and expanded. Thankfully for Izuku, his favorite part of the city was right where he had left it. But the park's natural beauty was quickly forgotten by the sight before him. A teenager beating up on a little girl. Izuku felt his nails dig into his palms and he quickly made his way over. Placing himself between the striking foot and the girl, he smiled. Hello there, my name is Izuku. Realizing that the kicking had stopped, the girl lowered her backpack and looked up curiously. Curly pink hair fell away and showing wide gold eyes. Whoever this boy was, he was barely moving as the foot that previously hitting her repeatedly came down on his back. I'm hey ho. Don't ignore me, the boy raged, taking a swipe at Izuku's head. I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that, Izuku said, dodging the attack. What's your name again? Mimi, the girl squeaked shyly. Mimi Hatsum. Izuku smiled even brighter as he helped Mimi to her feet. It's nice to meet you, Mimi-chan. It looks like you fell down. Mimi screamed as she saw her attacker activate his quirk, arms turning into multiple blades. Once again Izuku dodged the blades with ease, avoiding serious injury. Though he did still receive some shallow cuts from the razors on the boy's fingers were able to land. Looking up from the thin trails of BLD, Izuku frowned when he noticed a crowd starting to gather, pulling out their cell phones to film the confrontation rather than help. Some things never changed. Can I help you? Izuku for the first time spoke to the boy, placing himself between the bully and Mimi. Finally, paying attention to me, huh? The boy smirked, throwing his bag aside and getting into a fighting stance. Come on. Let's do this. All right, Izuku nodded, turning back towards the girl. Mimi-chan, what kind of juice do you like? It'll be my treat. Mimi looked confused. Was the boy not going to fight? Izuku, Eki. The boy roared, diving at Izuku again and trying to cut him. Expecting the attack this time, Izuku was able to easily weave and avoid every strike. Damn it. Stand still. Why? Izuku said, moving further and further away from Mimi and closer to the ever-expanding crowd of onlookers. I won't just let you attack me. Dodging another strike, Izuku moved forwards into the boy's space so that they were nose to nose. What's wrong? Can't hit someone more than half your size. Shut up, the boy roared, more blades bursting from his body pointing at Mimi. It's her fault anyway for being related to that freak. Oh, I see, Izuku said, taking a few steps back and giving Mimi a thumbs up. It's okay, Mimi-chan, you haven't done anything wrong. This little boy here's just throwing a tantrum. He's probably just jealous and lashing out. Some people in the crowd started laughing as the bullies' faces went a violent shade of crimson. Jealous? What would I have to be jealous of? Look at my quirk, it's perfect for being a hero. Izuku did a backflip, glad Tamura had talked him into gymnastics when he was younger. Here, yeah, right? Vegetable cutter is more like it. This only seemed to infuriate the bully more as some of the crowd started laughing. This moment was just what Izuku had been waiting for. I'm the strongest person in this 2-bit town. Everyone says what an amazing hero I'll be, he roared, the blades on his arms hitting each other over and over again till sparks started flying off them. I can do anything I want, and no one says anything because they know just how great I am. I could kill that little beach right here and now, and no one would stop me. Izuku stopped moving and looked at the crowd, really looked at them. Some had expressions of disgust and fear, some looked angry, most just looked hungry for more carnage. It was so similar to the looks he would see on people's faces centuries ago. The more the world changed, the more it stayed the same. Glancing back towards Mimi, all Izuku saw was a little girl scared and alone right now. Someone just looking for someone, anyone to help her. No, not someone Izuku. This boy was trying to enter the same world as Toshi and Aizawa, but he was nothing like them. He was cruel and toxic. Someone like that was anything like the men Izuku had come to know. He was nothing like family Izuku looked up to as his heroes. Fixing his eyes on the bully, Izuku took a step forward, unleashing some killing intent. You're wrong. Huh, the blade user said with a cocky grin, holding his hand to his ear. What am I wrong about? You're wrong because I would stop you. Izuku's eyes turning acidic as he released more murderous intent, freezing his prey where he stood. You claim you want to be a hero, but heroes don't hurt people. They help them. Shut up, the bully said, taking a step backwards for every step Izuku took forwards. What do you know anyway? Someday I'm gonna be bigger than All Might with tons of money and power, and you'll be Dash. The boy tripped over his discarded bag, falling to the ground just in front of the crowd that had gathered. Money, power, hell, even quirks, Izuku said, looking down at the boy with contempt. They don't matter. Superficial titles like number one and strongest don't matter. What matters is helping people, not hurting them. Looking up, Izuku stared directly into the cameras in front of him, letting the crowd feel his anger now. I don't need to be a hero or have a quirk to help someone in trouble. I just need to be brave and hold my hand out to them. Not even sparing the bully of the crowd any more time, Izuku turned around and walked back over to Mimi, picking her bag up and holding out his hand to her. The little girl stared at it for a moment before a huge smile came to her face, and she took it. So, Aizawa sighed, standing in front of the pair, arms crossed. Let me see if I understand. Toshinori gave a small squeak when Aizawa pointed at him. Your MSTRS's MST are found out that there was an immortal villain, and rather than tell anyone about them, he kept it to himself. Toshinori nodded. Aizawa then looked at Gran Torino, who was staring back defiantly. And when he died, you and Nana, was it? Teamed up to take him down. Except things didn't go as you planned, and she passed away, but not before telling this idiot Dash, hey, about him starting the whole Suizel all over again, Aizawa finished. And Izuku is his little brother who's been missing and frozen for these last 2 centuries. Does that cover everything? Gran grunted and nodded. When you say it like that, we must sound crazy. Shoyuta sighed and sat down in front of the pair, looking them dead in the eye. Does he go by all for one? Both men chocked as they stared at the underground hero, shocked by what he said. How do you know that name? Toshinori gasped. I'm underground, remember, Aizawa said. Anyone who's anyone in our field knows all about the boogeyman. I just never thought he was actually real. That name leads to a lot of trouble, you hear. Don't you dare use it so casually, Gran Torino spoke harshly. It was like he was expecting all for one himself to appear now that his name had been spoken aloud. Anyone who knows it knows not to say it out loud. How did you even hear it? Show you decide. Was about 7 years ago. Maybe I got called to do surveillance on this gang. I was maybe an hour in when the screaming started. The screams were what Eraserhead remembered the most. Even today, he still woke up from his worst nightmares hearing them. They had come out of nowhere as the elite members and their bodyguards of the newest, most dangerous upcoming gang crying and begging for mercy. One guy screamed his name and said he was sorry before something ripped him to shreds. In less than 5 minutes, 19 people were nothing more than bloody chunks of meat, Izawa explained, watching as the pair turned pale. The only survivor was the leader. Last I heard, he's still locked up in a maximum security mental institution, heavily sedated to stop his constant screaming. The tapes were quickly confiscated by the HC along with all the reports, Izawa continued. I was given a strong warning, if you will, to never let what I heard be known by the president herself. Not to mention a well-known broker walked up to me one day in the middle of the street and warned me not to open Pandora's box. Toshinori gulped, realizing that all this must have happened just before his battle with All for One. Did I what? Izawa asked, raising one eyebrow. Did you open the box? Shoyuta looked at the pair and shook his head when his phone went off on the table. Picking it up, he saw that Mike had sent him a link with the message, "Watch me," written below. Clicking the link, Shoyuta set the phone on the table as the three watched Izuku appear on the screen. Meta Liberation Army the top executives of the MLA watched the video, most looking amused at the boy who dodged and weaved away from his attacker. Curious hummed in approval as she watched the boy speak at them through the camera. Too bad they don't mention his name. I would love an interview. He would certainly make a good ally. Trumpet nodded, his finger lacing together. The younger generation could really rally behind someone like him. If we find him and turn him to our way of thinking, perhaps I can make him my protege. Give the word, sir, and I'll begin searching for this child. Skeptics pleaded, fingers tapping anxiously against the wood of the meeting table. Geaton was the only one who sat there silently. They were watching the video, wondering how strong the boy was. All he was doing was running around, not even a hint of his quirk to be seen. I shall have our friend go keep an eye out for this boy, Redestro said, eyes looking at the paused image of Izuku on the screen. For some reason he looked familiar, but Rikiya couldn't place him. Perhaps his parents had been members. In the meantime, Skeptic, if you would please start a file on him. Someone like this could certainly be the diamond in the rough we are looking for. Gentle and La Brava Manami waited with anticipation for the tea that Gentle was preparing. She had uploaded their newest video last night. As per tradition, that meant a special tea party was to be had before they opened the page to check their numbers. Manami had a real good feeling about this particular video and was willing to bet it went viral. La Brava, a kind voice came as a steaming teacup was set on the desk along with a plate of heart-shaped cookies. Surprise! Looking at the cookies, the hacker felt herself gasp at the sight of the baked treats. The pink and red frosted cookies were her favorites. Manami's felt herself swoon. Gentle knew her favorite cookie. No one but her parents had ever taken the time to learn such a thing about her. As thanks for all your hard work, I got your favorite. Gentle smiled softly, sitting down and picking one up for himself. Though I have to confess, I have become fond of them myself. Their sweetness pairs quite nicely with many of my teas. Manami's hands covered her bright red face while Danjuro booted up the computer, pulling up the video website. The pair watched in disappointment as it was not a picture of the gentle criminal's latest crime that appeared at the top, but of some green-haired nobody. Though Gentle's smiling face could be seen just below. Wanting to see how this boy had beaten them, Danjuro clicked on the video and the pair watched closely. Shy Husaikai Overhaul closed the laptop and sat back in his chair, thinking about the video. This boy, whoever he was, claimed that quirks didn't matter. It was probably a long shot, but Kai couldn't help but wonder if the child was a pure human being. Someone free from the disease that plagued them. Closing his eyes, the young Yakuza leader started wondering. If this child was genuinely quirkless, He should be protected, and Kai was the only person who could do that. Though he would have to do something about the boy's heroic attitude. And speaking of heroics, wasn't he rescuing a child in the video? Aries' current guardian wasn't working out. Perhaps this boy was just the solution he was looking for. One way or another, Overhaul would gain a new subordinate or a guinea pig. Jiren Kajiro knew who the boy was related to instantly. After so many years of working for All for One, the broker was proud to say that he was one of the few who had seen the man's true face and lived. Saving the video and backing it up on numerous different devices, Kajiro picked up the phone to see if anyone he employed was currently in Naboo. It was only a matter of time before All for One saw the video, and Jiren needed to be prepared. Himiko giggled as she paused and rewound one part of the video over and over again. She watched with a hungry gleam in her eye as the person recording zoomed in on the adorable boy's bleeding arm. It was so pretty and red that the runaway couldn't help but salivate at the thought of the BLD hitting her tongue. Giggling to herself, Himiko turned off her phone and grabbed her knife, heading out to one of her favorite spots in the city. The next day, the dead body of a young man with dark hair and freckles would be found in an alleyway drained of BLD spinner Shuichi felt excited when he watched the video, hoping that someday he could meet the stranger. Someone like that would defiantly be a kind person who wouldn't judge him, right? Mr. Compress at Suhiro's side as he flicked on his apartment's lights, shedding his jacket and throwing it over the couch. Another dull day at the office, working for people who didn't seem to appreciate anything he or the other drones did for them. Looking over to the altar, Atsuhiro smiled at the picture of his older sister holding his niece and nephew. The new puppy he had gotten them held proudly in the youngest child's arms. Perhaps this weekend he would don his disguise and head out to the park. Opening up his computer, already starting to plan what magic tricks the children might love to see and if anyone was interested in hiring him for a job. Magna what Magna liked most about the boy were his eyes. They were so clear and focused. Eyes like that were determined to change the world. Sadly, she knew from experience that people who had eyes like that were also those who ended up getting killed the quickest. Life wasn't a fairy tale where good always triumphed, and everyone lived happily ever after. Society thrived on cruel and bloody forms of entertainment, and kids like that one were its favorite. He seemed nice. He was an idiot. Did he remember to take the trash out today? His hair looked like broccoli. Could he help us? Would he smile at me to... Of course, not you idiot. Could he make the voices stop? F you crazy bastard. We're the real Eugene. Yeah, you're just a clone. Maybe you're the clone, idiot. Ever think of that? Gene pressed his hands over his masked ears harder, rocking back and forth, trying to drown everyone out. Dobby threw his phone at the wall, rage building up inside him. How dare some brat talk about how titles didn't matter? If titles didn't matter, then what Endeavor was trying to achieve didn't matter. If what Endeavor was trying to achieve with Dobby and his siblings didn't matter. The pain their mother endured every day until she broke didn't matter. Was everything he had done up until now was worthless? I'm worthless. Slamming the door to his apartment shut with a loud bang, Dobby stalked out into the night flames, eager to burn something. Kaizome was pulling his blade from a fake hero's corpse when his phone dinged. Jumping onto the nearest roof, the hero killer pulled up the video, wondering which so-called hero would be featured today. Imagine his surprise. It was not a hero but rather a young child that started talking. Letting the full video played, Stain decided to keep an eye on the UA Sports Festival for the next few years. Seeing him smile at the young girl, ignoring the crowd and his own injuries, gave the killer some small hope. Perhaps his message was finally starting to get through to people. If it wasn't, well, Kaizome would swiftly handle this new fake like he had all the others. Ujiko was not focused on the video's main subject, but instead on the blade using the child he was fighting. Perhaps he should take a trip out to his clinic near Naboo and acquire the boy. His quirk, though simple, might be interesting to use in his next Nomu. and it would be simple to get around Sensei's rules about children. He had done so before. Tamura and Kurogiri Kurogiri watched as Tamura Shigaraki screamed and decayed the old machinery. The warp gate user had heard the shouting from upstairs and transported the pair to one of Sensei's warehouses, thinking they were under attack. It became clear quickly enough though that after watching something on his computer Tamura Shigaraki had become quite irritated, especially if his neck was any indication. Now the ashen-haired man was grabbing things left and right as he mumbled to himself. Lies, all lies. No one helps you, no one offers you a hand, he's a liar. I'll kill him. All for one. Hisashi slept peacefully after a full day of being looked over by his doctor. The routine checkups always took a lot out of the villain, who would sleep for a few days afterwards, undisturbed in a safe house guarded by his most loyal comrade. Hisashi was completely unaware that the person he was searching for was just one town over, currently pulling drinks out of a vending machine. Izuku pushed the button on the vending machine twice, listening as 2 cans of juice dropped a moment later. Picking them up in his now bandaged arm, he walked back towards the bench Mimi was sitting on as she put the last of her first aid kit away. The verdant-haired boy was concerned at first when she had pulled out such a large kit from the bottom of her backpack. As the girl bandaged his arm, Izuku complimented her skills, asking if she was interested in medicine. Mimi explained that to her older sister. The bully was so mad about was always in need of some bandage since she liked inventing. Though some part of Izuku's mind nagged at him that Mimi was only telling him half the story. As much as Izuku wanted to press and get answers, he also understood that he and Mimi had just met. Even though he had helped her out, that didn't mean the girl would be willing to share her entire life's story with him. However, that certainly wouldn't stop him from making sure that he and Mimi stayed in contact no matter what fate had in store for him. Sitting on the bench, Izuku gave his undivided attention to Mimi, trying his best not to openly stare at the statue in front of him. So, this sort of thing happen often? Mimi froze for a moment, slowly nodding, her bangs now covering her eyes. Big sis isn't very liked? I see, Izuku hummed, taking a sip of his drink while Mimi fiddled with the tab of her can. Why is that? Mimi tightened her grip a little and thought about it. Why did people dislike May? Sure, she was obsessive about her inventions. She often blew herself up testing a nude baby, laughing as she started working on the mangled item. But she never tested anything near people in case someone got hurt. May was smart, kind, and always gave the best hugs. One summer, she worked obsessively on a new custom greenhouse for Mimi's birthday so she could keep her plants alive during winter. The sisters were very close with each other since their parents worked long hours. Even though it hurt to have her go away, Mimi knew that May's dream was to go to U8 to graduate from the support course. Then she would start her own support company and spend the rest of her life building things to make people happy. It didn't make sense why people didn't like her. But I don't know, Mimi confessed. Tears were falling from her eyes, wondering if May was lonely. Mimi had never once seen her older sister with friends. Izuku was about to say something when he felt something hard press into the back of his head, followed by the voice of a demon. Excuse me, but are you the piece of sheet that made my adorable baby sister cry? Sniffling, Mimi whipped around and saw May standing behind the bench, her favorite wrench pressed to the back of Izuku's head. With a happy cry, Mimi dropped her can and threw herself at her big sister. May, I'm sorry, Mimi sobbed, feeling her sister lift her up in her strong arms as she continued to sob. Hey little bud, May smiled, one arm holding Mimi while the other combed through her hair. What's wrong? Is this guy being mean to you? I can teach him a lesson, you know. We inventors are always up for a challenge. Izuku looked at the well-defined muscles under May's sleeves and shivered, raising a hand and waving. Please don't. May looked at the boy sitting and drinking juice and gave him her most vicious smile when he started inching away. Stay put, green bean. I'll get to you in a second. No, May, Mimi cried, pushing away and shaking her head. Don't hurt Izuku. He saved me. Before May could answer, she heard her phone gave a shrill alarm, which was strange. She was rarely contacted by anyone other than Mimi or their parents. Readjusting her little sister, May pulled her phone out from her uniform's breathes. Yes, she wore the boy's uniform. It made working on her babies much easier, thank you very much. Opening her messenger, she saw dozens of texts from people asking her if this was her sister. Clicking the video, May watched closely as Mimi stood in the background, a boy from her class attacking the one in front of her. When her classmate threatened her sister, May nearly broke the phone in anger. When it finished, the inventor simply put the device back in her pocket and stared at the boy who had gone red as the video played. Well, aren't you a real Prince Charming? The boy started flailing to cover his head with his arms in some attempt to hide his flushed face. This is so embarrassing. May's eyes narrowed. What's so embarrassing about saving my sister? No, Izuku said, shaking animatedly. You got it all wrong. Saving Mimi-chan was the right thing to do. It's just... Izuku's fingers came together, and he looked so embarrassed. That video makes me look kinda cool, and I'm not like that. I'm just plain old Izuku. Well, plain old Izuku, May smirked, extending her hand. I'm May Hatsum. You better remember that name because I'm the next genius of you. A's support course and world's future top inventor. Izuku looked at May, his eyes suddenly growing wider as her grabbed her hand with gusto. Moving forward, Izuku's face was so close to the Hatsum sisters they could have sworn they saw stars in his eyes. May, the boy said earnestly. Have you ever invented a jetpack before? May started at the boy for a second before a huge smile broke out over her face as the pair started talking about her many babies. ******, Gran Torino ran as fast as his quirk could carry him. After watching the video, the three heroes had split up to hunt for Izuku. Toshinori was ordered to stay at the inn if Izuku returned, leaving Gran and Aizawa to split the town's only 2 parks between them. Sorahiko knew they should have gotten the brat a cell phone before coming here. Even if he had ignored their calls, there were always those locator apps people used. That would have made this so much easier. Gran was just about to take off when he heard a voice from heaven. Bye, Izuku, we'll see you later. You better call me Charming, another female chimed. I can't wait for you to meet my babies. The babies. The retired hero nearly lost his mind running past 2 pink-haired girls and seeing Izuku sitting comfortably on a bench staring at a statue. There you are, the old man yelled, jetting over and landing on the bench. Izuku looked at Sorahiko from the corner of his eyes, mumbling a, "Oh hey Grumpy," as he took a sip of juice. Hey, the jet hero said, hands clenching. Hey, is that all you have to say to me? Hello, Gran wished suddenly he had a scarf like Aizawa so he could strangle the kid. Plopping down on the bench next to him, the retired hero sent a text to the others letting them know he had found Izuku. He also sent his location to Aizawa, in case Izuku ran again. Looking up to yell at the boy again, Sorahiko found empty air instead. Standing up, the former hero whipped around looking for All for One's little brother, when something cold bopped the back of his head. Turning around, he saw Izuku standing there with a new can of juice for himself in one hand, the other holding out a water bottle. Grabbing the bottle, Sorahiko drank half the thing, watching Izuku sit back down on the bench, a little further away than before, and continued to stare at the statue. Looking at the podium figure, the jet hero couldn't understand what was so special about it. It was just some kid, boy or girl, Sorahiko wasn't sure, sitting in the middle of bronze flowers, a cheerful expression frozen on their face. Looking down, Gran read the plaque underneath, "Children should be cherished so that they become seeds to a better future." Putting his water down, Gran looked severe. You know something about this state? Izuku hummed. Did you know them? Gran asked. I did, Izuku answered, one cold green eye looking at the man next to him. What about it? What about them? Gran countered, pointing at the figure on the statue. Who are they? They are, Izuku said, putting his juice down, a somber expression appearing on his face. Their story involves you know who. Are you sure you want to hear about them? You're not exactly his biggest fan. No sheet, Gran said, his hand crushing the water bottle slightly. But I thought a lot about it when I was staying with you and Toshinori. Especially after that old hag, Chio rang my bell a few times with that demed cane of hers. I'm gonna tell her you said that. My point is, Sorahiko hissed, that I'm an old man now and can't change how I feel about your brother. But maybe I at least shut up and listen about when he wasn't a total a-hole. Izuku gave the man a skeptic look as he leaned back against the bench. All right then, he spoke, pointing at the statue. Who you see there is Midori, my first and really only friend. She's also the first person whose quirk I ever took. Gran looked at the statue again with newfound interest. Back in my day, you see quirks as you call them weren't seen as normal everyday things. They were a great source of shame to a person and their family. Izuku began to talk, a faraway look in his eyes. Midori's father worked as my family's gardener and her mother a maid. For as long as I could remember, she was with me, my best friend in the whole world until that day. Sorahiko took a stab in the dark, given the appearance of the statue. The day her quirk came. Izuku nodded, taking a small sip of juice. It wasn't really all that powerful. When she touched a flower, she could make them blossom instantly. Midori loved plants and wanted to work with her father when she was older, but she got really scared when her quirk came. Even in our isolated world, the two of us had heard about what happened to people with abilities. Gran felt his heart clench. The story Banjo had told him and Nana of when he was young hadn't painted a pretty picture of the world. The former jet hero could only imagine how much worse it was back in the beginning. Midori avoided going outside for weeks afterwards and would scream whenever she saw any plants inside. It took me months of begging to get her to tell me what was wrong. When she finally did, Izuku smiled sadly. I hugged her and told her that no matter what, I would always protect her. Izuku placed his hand on his ear. That's when mine kicked in, and I felt her quirk unravel and travel into me. It was like someone was dragging something up my arms. When we separated, Midori looked shocked and immediately touched a small plant, but nothing happened. She was so happy, she broke down in my arms and started crying. We didn't know then. Izuku felt tears start pricking his eyes. Her mom had overheard us. The pair lapsed into silence for a long time until Gran heard the sound of liquid sloshing. Looking over at Izuku, the hero saw that the boy had gone completely pale and had started shaking. There was so much BLD, Izuku said. Memories were flooding into him of coming over to the small house the Shigarakis had given the family to live in. He remembered opening the door and gagging from the smell, that horrible coppery smell. And Midori was just lying there. I think Hisashi heard me scream. Izuku remembered Midori lying there staring up at the ceiling blankly. Her father was not too far away from both stabbed to death by her mother. Gran saw Toshinori and Aizawa running towards him at full speed, the blonde completely ignoring his mentor. What happened? Aizawa asked, looking at Gran seriously. I swear we were just talking, the jet hero said, feeling sick himself at what Izuku must have seen at such a young age. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Izuku latched onto Toshinori's shirt, looking at the blonde with terror. She killed them, she killed all of them. Midori's mom killed Inko and Mikumo. I take it things aren't going any better. Toshinori winced at the question as he waited patiently for a certain person to step off of the morning commute train. Yes and no. Izuku's memory is starting to come back a little more. But I'm not sure that's necessarily a good thing. Given what you've told me, I'm not surprised, the principal spoke, a small bit of anger slipping into his tone. Toshinori sighed as he watched the passing commuters go by, none who he was waiting for. You know, I used to wonder how someone like him could rise to power so quickly. Why so many chose to follow? Izuku's mentioned things escalated very quickly, but I still didn't get it. Then I heard about his friend, and suddenly everything made sense. A mother murdering her husband and child because one had a quirk. Evading the police for years because no one cared to look beyond the child having a quirk. Was it really any wonder now how someone like All for One could have been born? The mere thought of it all still made Toshinori sick. By God, if someone had done that to Melissa because she didn't have a quirk, Toshinori wasn't sure anyone would be able to stop him. And something told him that Midori and her father were just the tip of a very tragic iceberg. Perhaps then this is good all of us, Netsu pointed out as Toshinori looked up, hearing the voice over the PA announce the arrival of the next train. People frequently see All Might, the symbol of peace, instead of Toshinori Yagi. So, By that logic, it is fair to assume that All for One has also carefully crafted its image over the years. Perhaps the real key to defeating him really lies within Hisashi Shigaraki. Tsukachi stepped off the train and immediately spotted Tashinori's tall form over the other people waving as he got off the train. The blonde gave a weak wave back, giving a small chuckle at something Izuku had told them at breakfast. Did you know that Al's Hisashi can't cook? A complete failure in the kitchen apparently. And he loved these pink bunny slippers his wife got him as a joke because they always made his son laugh. Nedzu remained quiet, and Tamura was apparently quite the card shark. Tashinori continued. I'm guessing that's how they raised most of the money for their school. The symbol of peace, heard Nedzu chuckle. And I bet Izuku is just as skilled. Repeatedly destroyed us all in Uno. I've never seen Gran so mad, Tashinori laughed. And he was accepted into college at 13. I've never heard of anyone do young being accepted so before. Is that so? Nedzu spoke, sounding very interested. I suppose I'll have to step up my tutoring. And he's made friends with this girl who is applying to UA and her little sister, Tashinori said, glad that Izuku had found someone his own age to talk to. Mei was a driven girl who would give Power Loader a lot of headaches when she was accepted. And Mimi was just adorable, a little shy, but so was Melissa at that age. The two of them have been grilling Aizawa about the school. When we get back, be prepared for a huge presentation on the benefits of a dorm system. You don't say, Nedzu hummed Tashinori, seeing the wheels already turning in the principal's head. Yeah, Tashinori smiled, raising one finger to his friend. I was also thinking of showing him around my agency. It might be a good bonding experience for us. Just be careful. Izuku has some. Nedzu paused. Interesting opinions, as it were, on the hero system. I think I've heard some of them already, Tashinori said, having witnessed one rant concerning the age of those who attended the hero course. Things like child solider were tossed around along with sentiments like they can fight killers, but they can't drink. Frequently. I'll send you an email tonight with an update on what we learn. The two exchanged goodbyes, and Tashinori hung up, giving Naomasa a colossal smile. Thanks for coming. I know it was pretty last minute. Hey, the detective said, readjusting his bag. When the number one personally calls asking for an SERT, the top brass are more than happy to spare you. And you get overtime? Tsukachi nodded. And I get overtime? Well, let me show you to the inn. We can drop off your stuff and then head out, Tashinori said, placing his hand on his friend's shoulder and leaning in close to whisper. Did you bring it? The detective nodded and patted his duffel bag. All packed and ready. Thank goodness. Tashinori sighed in relief as they started walking. Gran nearly gave me a heart attack promising a public appearance. After dropping off Tsukachi's bag, Tashinori sent Aizawa and Gran asking for their location. A few seconds later, he got a detailed map instructing him where to go and a message from the retired hero to wear his best clothes. For some reason, after Izuku's confession in the park, Gran had been strangely silent about anything All for One related. Tashinori had seen the man shove more food into his mouth whenever the eldest Shigaraki was brought up than he thought humanly possible. And when he wasn't cramming food into him, the former jet hero was staring out the window with a strange look on his face. Gran Torino wasn't big on tact or forgiveness. This often got him into trouble back during his single year of teaching. But even he had been more than a little shocked after that day in the park. In his own way, Tashinori wondered if his old teacher was also trying to separate Hisashi from All for One just as he was. Hey Toshi, Tsukachi said, grabbing the blonde's shoulders before he walked into a pole. Geez, you're out of it today. The blonde rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Sorry about that, just thinking. Tsukachi's face became serious. Yeah, I bet. Look, I wanted to tell you before we met up with the others. Remember my investigation? Tashinori nodded. Checking out Izuku's story about waking up in a tunnel. Yeah, Tsukachi said, pulling out his phone and notepad. I've been trying to retrace his steps, but so far, no luck finding where he appeared from. I did talk to a lot of the homeless population and shelters, seeing if anyone knew some stories. And one guy told me a story about a monster named San who lived underground, Tsukachi explained. He has plenty in his record for being drunk in public, but the name San got me thinking of the number 3, Toshinori finished, eyes widening. It's defiantly possible. What about the names? Did anything come up in your records? Tsukachi shook his head. That's a little more complicated. As you know, a majority of records for that time were lost in the Great Fire. Luckily, when talking to Izuku, he mentioned his middle school. It was a long shot, but I called in a favor and had a friend in the city look into it for me. Holding out his phone, Toshinori accepted it and found a picture of Izuku staring back at him. The name Izuku Shigaraki is printed clearly below. Thankfully, the school is one of those old money places and kept all its old yearbooks, Tsukachi said as Toshinori flipped through the photos. Izuku's school picture, a photo of him in the student council, helping out in activities, tutoring. The photos continued until one final one located near what Toshinori assumed was the back of the book. A full-page memorial dedicated to one Izuku Shigaraki. Shoyuta waited patiently outside the flower shop waiting for Izuku to finish up his purchase inside. Gran Torino waited calmly next to him, holding a box full of offerings. Today Izuku wanted to take them to visit his parents' grave, or at least the place where they had been 200 years ago. Shoyuta wasn't sure why he wanted to do so. From what he had gathered during their first conversation, the mother had died when he was born and was negligent towards her other children, and the father the same, only abusive as well. But Izuku still wanted to visit them for some reason. All might barely enough time to call someone and have them come out to the town. The number 1 had gone to meet this mystery guest at the train station. If the underground hero was betting man, his money would be on Nezu. Shoyuta 100% certain that not only did Nezu know about All for One, but that the principal also helped cover up the fight from 5 years ago. Hey, Gran said, nudging Aizawa in the side. He's here. Glancing up, Shoyuta was surprised to find not Nezu next to the All Might but Detective Tsukachi. Sorry we're late, Toshinori said, gesturing to the officer next to him. Allow me to introduce you. Aizawa, this is Tsukachi, Aizawa interrupted, extending his hand to the officer. Nice to see you again. The detective smiled and took the offered hand. Eraserhead, nice to see you again. And hello sensei, it's been a while. Torino looked at the taller man for a second, eyes narrowed before the face clicked to another one. You're that Gen Ed brat who used to bandage this idiot up? That's right, Tsukachi smiled. Glad you haven't forgotten me. Gran scoffed. How could I? You were the only person who would willingly enter the training ground when we were sparring. Toshinori started shaking as memories of the spars he had with Gran Torino replayed in his mind. He was so caught up in his memories that he didn't hear Izuku exit the flower shop holding 2 large bouquets. Izuku looked at the group and, seeing the newcomer, narrowing his eyes in recognition. Why is the police officer who questioned me here? Snapping out of his daze, Toshinori smiled at the boy. Oh right, you two never officially met. Izuku, this is my good friend Detective Naomasa Tsukachi. Tsukachi, this is Izuku Shigaraki, my uncle. Izuku finished adjusting his flowers so they wouldn't get squished, extending his hand. Thank you for being friends with my nephew Naomasa. Tsukachi shook the hand, offering his own greeting while mouthing the word uncles to Toshinori. As soon as introductions were over, the group set off towards their destination. A rather grand manor was located just next to an expansive forest, the same one Toshinori knew Izuku had been researching. It was widely considered the pride and joy of Naboo and brought tourists flocking to it from all across the country. Even though it was technically owned by the Akatani group on paper, the city was really the ones who maintained and made use of it. Everything from weddings to corporate retreats had been held in it at one time or another. The garden was especially famous amongst the entertainment industry and had been featured in many movie and television shows. There was only one area forbidden to people, a small acre of land behind the garden. That spot was their current destination. Everyone walked in silence, feeling a heavy invisible weight pressed down on their shoulders with each step they took. At the end of the path, the trees parted, revealing a small clearing that housed multiple gravestones. Izuku's eyes focused on one in particular. Oh, of course he used this place. We all loved it here, he mumbled, walking towards 2 gravestones that were separate from the others, placing a bouquet in front of each headstone. When he was finished, Izuku plucked 2 flowers out and made his way to the largest grave. It was an angel holding a smiling child as she stared down at those below with a soft smile. Next to the stone woman was a larger headstone followed by 6 smaller ones. Izuku placed the flowers in front of the 2 graves and turned around looking at the group. I can't tell you what happened after I disappeared. I can only tell you what I do remember. Toshinori looked like he wanted to say something, but Izuku held up his hand, stopping him. Our parents weren't great people. Mother cared about her image and partying more than her children, and father, he was cruel. Aizawa felt part of himself wince at that, knowing what Izuku meant. It was just us after father died, and that was fine. We were okay 'cause we still had each other. Izuku spoke, remembering the quiet house that he had grown up in had suddenly burst to life with the arrival of one woman. Then she came, Inko Akatani, the first person to ever hold the title of All for One. Gran Torino and All Might both instantly felt it. It was as though the air had been eaten from their lungs at the confession. Inko Akatani. The woman they just thought was just All for One's wife had actually been the first to use that name. How could something like that be possible? How did their All for One come to possess the name for himself? It was clear from what Izuku had told them that Hisashi had loved his wife very much. So how did he end up taking her name for himself? And more importantly, where did One for All and the first play into this? Tsukachi's hand twitched, wanting to get out his notebook to write down what Izuku was saying. His quirk was telling him that everything the boy was saying so far was true. Aizawa, on the other hand, just stood there looking up at the statue, wondering what the woman's role was in the horror that surrounded the underworld's boogeyman. Izuku ran his fingers over Inko's name, turning to look at everyone. Her name was Inko Akatani, and as I've said, she was Hisashi's wife. When I first met her, they were classmates at university and hated each other. 200 years ago, Inko readjusted the heavy backpack again as she got off the bus. That curly-haired bastard had better appreciate her coming all the way to the other side of town just to drop off his assignments, she mentally grumbled. Fists clenched slightly tighter around the strap. If Inko found out he was just ditching, she would personally make sure Shigaraki never saw the inside of a classroom again. Pulling out a piece of paper from her pocket, Inko walked in the direction of Shigaraki's house, eventually coming to stand in front of a massive gate. Glancing between the paper and the address on the plaque, Inko sighed, realizing that she had found the place. Staring at the house through the metal, the raven-haired woman felt her blood boil slightly at the sight of the vast residence. Inko worked 2 jobs and had a scholarship to help her with tuition and could still only afford to live in a crappy little apartment. Yet here was the great Shigaraki's house, the genius of the law program and future politician. Inko doubted the man even really appreciated what he had. Pressing the buzzer, she waited a few minutes before a woman's voice answered. Hello, Shigaraki residence. My name is Rin. How can I help you today? Hi, Inko said, trying to keep her tone as neutral as possible. It wasn't this woman's fault that she worked for the most frustrating man on the planet. My name is Inko Akatani. I'm here to see Shigaraki. The voice on the other side was silent for a moment before a response came. I'm sorry, but to which of the young emestiers are you referring to? Before she could stop herself, Inko blurted out. There's more than one curly bestier. The muffled sound of chuckling was heard on the other end before a loud buzz came and the gate opened. Taking that as a sign to come in, Inko proceeded to walk up the driveway, her eyes narrowing suspiciously at the sight of a few police cars. Putting thoughts of law enforcement out of her head, Inko smoothed her clothing out and rang the doorbell. A second later, an older woman in glasses opened the door, giving Inko a strained smile as she welcomed her into the mansion. Hello, Miss Akatani. I'm Rin, the head maid of this household, she said, giving a small curtsy. I'm afraid that young Emestier Hisashi is in a meeting currently. Allow me to show you to the parlor where you can wait. Inko put her hands up and shaking her head. No, it's all right. I can dash, please, Rin spoke, placing one hand firmly on Inko's back, guiding her further into the house. I insist. Unable to say no, Inko let herself be led towards a room just off a grand staircase. Dropping her bag and looking around, Inko realized the room was bigger than her apartment. Immediately she got to work exploring, wondering what it was for. It had a reasonably simple, ornate table surrounded by uncomfortable-looking chairs. A small piano that she doubted her classmate could play in one corner along with various other expensive-looking trinkets scattered around. But what really grabbed Inko's attention was the pair of large paintings that hung above the piano. One was of an appealing woman with dark hair, though the painter highlighted green in it and cold brown eyes. Even though the woman was only a painting, she stared down at Inko like she was a bug beneath her shoes. The other painting also looked at Inko with thinly veiled disgust and was an older man with white hair, a small mustache and goatee and green eyes. No doubt about it, Inko thought, these were Shigaraki's mother and father. The man's face and woman's cold gaze looked so similar to her classmates it was almost creepy. Crash Inko jumped at the sudden noise and carefully made her way to the door, curious about what was going on. Opening it just slightly, she peeked out and saw Shigaraki standing there looking more furious than she had ever seen him. If you think for 1 second, I will just let this go as you say you clearly haven't been paying attention, Hisashi growled, his hands clenching at his sides. People have been killed. A child has been murdered. Inko covered her mouth to hold her gasp in. Now, Mr. Shigaraki, a conceited-sounding voice answered. From what I understand, the child in question had certain abilities. You wouldn't want it getting out that a member of your household staff was a freak, now do you? From what I hear you have a bright future in politics to consider. A second voice gasped loudly. Sir. Inko felt her nails dig into her palms and was about to storm out when Shigaraki beat her to the punch. Freak. A freak. Hisashi roared, any patience he once had, evaporating immediately. The father had been a member of my household for close to 2 decades. Now just because some murderess claims her child had powers, they are to be written off like so much garbage. Now hold on, you didn't have to, Shigaraki bellowed. Your answer is quite clear. Should a murderer say that their victim had abilities, then you will write it off as justified. Pat them on the head and send them on their merry way without a second thought to those left mourning. Mr. Shigaraki Kahaku, Hisashi hissed, looking next to him at someone Inko couldn't quite make out. Escort these men out. I have some calls to make. Sir. Please, we're sorry, the squeaky voice begged, sounding terrified. We'll find her. I promise. Hisashi sneered, and for some reason, it sent a chill of fear up Inko's spine. Don't worry, you won't have to. I'll be calling the superintendent personally to ask for new detectives to be placed on the case since his current ones had no interest in helping freaks. Whatever the 2 police officers were going to say went unheard as they were skirted away. Noticing Rin walk up to Shigaraki and whisper something to him, Inko quickly closed the door and moved back towards the table. Her hands were shaking as she started taking the homework assignments out. The gentle knock that came made Inko flinch as Shigaraki opened the door and walked inside. Akatani, the white-haired male greeted, his arms crossed as he scowled. My apologizes for the delay. Inko gave a nervous smile. It's all right, how much did you hear? Hisashi interrupted, his face mirroring that of the woman's portrait. Inko spoke, her heart beating a mile a minute. All of it really? I see, Hisashi nodded. You would do best to keep your mouth shut about it then. Anger flared inside Inko as she stood up, slamming her hands on the table. Excuse me. You heard me. Green eyes narrowed as Hisashi took a few steps forward until he was right in front of his classmate, mirroring her stance from the other side of the table. Shut. Inko growled lowly, all previous fear and nervousness gone and replaced with righteous fury. How dare you order me around? Who do you think you are? I don't think I know, Hisashi spoke, standing up straight and crossing his arms over his and I know that think me to be some rich spoiled brat. Because you are, Inko snapped back. I bet never had to work a day in your life. Just because I do not have to work like you to feed and clothe myself does not mean I am lazy, Hisashi argued, one hand slamming back onto the table. If I was, then how would I know your secret? Inko froze, fear all color draining from her face. I don't know what you're talking about. Once is an accident, twice a coincidence, but 3 times is a pattern, Hisashi smirked. And you Akatani are not as discreet as you believe you are when summoning school supplies. Before Inko could come up with an excuse, something slammed the door open. Whatever it was ran as fast as it could into the room, colliding with Shigaraki's leg. Hiken, the small bundle cried, tiny hands appearing from underneath the blanket and grabbing onto the man's leg tightly. Izuku, Shigaraki gasped, his face morphing from cruel to concerned as he knelt down and picked up whoever was under the large blanket. What's wrong? Are you okay? Where's Tamura? Inko stood there stunned. Here she was watching the man who just threatened her fuss over the small boy. Taking a closer look at the child's face, he and Shigaraki were obviously related. Was it possible her classmate had a child? He would have had to have been very young when the child was born. Stop that, Hisashi hissed, snapping Inko from her thoughts. I can see your mind working. Izuku is my youngest brother, not my son. Though he does feel like that sometimes. A new voice came from the entrance. Looking towards the doorway, Inko saw a frail-looking man with straight white hair holding a tray. The newcomer defiantly shared the same green eyes as Shigaraki and the child, though his face resembled the woman's painting more and was infinitely kinder-looking. He placed the tray of the table where Inko saw an assortment of treats along with a tea set. The woman felt her stomach growl treacherously, looking at the goodies. She only looked back up when a loud cry startled her suddenly. No! The child screamed loudly. Inko winced at the volume and almost felt sorry for her classmate seeing as one of his ears was right next to the boy. No on Hiken. No Rakchon. Come now, Izuku, Rakchon smiled softly, holding his arms out. Hisashi has work to do. Why don't we go see about finishing our story? Izuku shook his head, clinging to the eldest tighter. Hiken, don't make me. Hisashi sighed and placed his hand behind Izuku's head, running his fingers through his curls. I'll make you a deal. I'll go with you to see about getting snacks from Rin and then you can go with Tamura. No. Hisashi looked at his Inko, who had her hand over to mouth to stop herself from laughing. And I'll read you however many stories you want tonight. Izuku sniffled and pulled back, wiping his eyes. Promise. Promise. Izuku wrapped his arms around Hisashi's neck again, going limp in his elder brother's arms as they walked out. Inko waved goodbye to the boy just to be friendly, only for him to curl more into Hisashi's body when they locked eyes. The elder Shigaraki paused at the door and glared at Inko. I'll be right back. Tamura, would you please keep our guest company? Of course, the other male smiled serenely, holding a freshly poured cup out. Sure, Inko said, taking the tea, letting the calming smell wash over her. Tamura sat down and poured his own cup, looking at Inko with tired eyes. Please forgive my brother's rudeness. It's been a hard week for all of us. Inko put the teacup down and frowned. If you don't mind me asking, what happened? Tamura said, his own clinking harshly on the saucer. I'm sure you saw the police on your way in. Kinda hard to miss them, Inko said, picking up a cookie and nibbling on it. They were here to not so subtly tell us that catching a murderer did not rank too highly on their priority list, Tamura explained. A dark look came over his face, and Inko choked on the cookie slightly in shock. Serve and protect my butt? They're all just a bunch of bigoted fools if you ask me. Asterisk cough, excuse me, the student gasped, taking a few sips of her drink to try and clear her throat. They still haven't caught this person. Those a-holes. Were they? I'm gonna kick their butts. Unaware she was doing it, some of the smaller items in the room started floating as Inko's own power responding to her anger. Tamura sat there and watched a curious look on his face as he grabbed a cookie off the now floating plate. Fascinating, he said, biting into the cookie. Your ability seems to respond to your anger. I wonder, does the amount of weight you can lift change because of your emotional state? What? Inko said, snapping out of it, the floating item returning back to the table. Realizing she had been caught, Inko became nervous. Words were one thing, experience had taught Inko that they could be covered in the sweetest of honey to hide the poisonous truth underneath. For all, She knew the man in front of her was just as bigoted as that detective was. Shigaraki's threat fresh in Inko's mind. Tamura gave the nervous woman a smile and waved his hand. Don't worry, Hisashi already told me about you. He did, Inko said warily. And what does Hisashi say about me? Tamura smirked as he took a sip of tea. That you have powers like he and Izuku do. That your proposals for laws are too short-sighted. That he's never met a more frustrating woman in the entire universe. Wait, Inko exclaimed, waving her hands. He said what? That you're frustrating? Inko shook her head. No, the other thing. That Hisashi also has abilities. No, well, yes, that too, Inko said, curious about the Shigaraki's abilities maybe. The middle part? Ah, Tamura said picking up another cookie. That your law proposals are short-sighted. Are you kidding me? Inko cried, reaching down and pulling one of her own binders from the bag, opening it. Look at these, ideas for new anti-discrimination laws. Arguments against the registration of citizens. I even have something in here about a business who publicly hire people those with abilities receiving tax breaks Those tax breaks support greedy men and women who will no doubt take advantage of their employees. They shall work them into the ground well and only paying them half of what they should be getting. Hisashi's voice came from the door, getting Inko and Tamura's attention. Hisashi stood there holding Izuku in one arm, the boy staring longingly at the plate held in his other hand. I've told you this before in class. Your idealism could end up getting someone killed. Inko stood up, not one to back down from a challenge. And I suppose your slow and steady plan is the best idea. People are getting hurt out there. The law has to catch up quickly if we are ever going to help them. The law is not the problem, Hisashi retorted, passing Izuku off to Tamura, who sat there watching the pair with amusement. People they are stupid and attack anyone different from. Your laws place those different people in the spotlight with some naive notion that we can all get along. Tamura smiled and looked down at Izuku picking up the plate. Why don't we go finish that story now? Izuku didn't say anything, just hung as limply in Tamura's arms as he had Hisashi's. Ever since Izuku had found Midori and her father, he had regressed somewhat in his behavior. He usually was fiercely independent and acted as a miniature version of Hisashi. But ever since that day, Izuku had been terrified. He clung to his brothers tighter than he had when father had died. Tamura had seen changes in Hisashi as well. His already overprotective nature was becoming suffocating. The middle brother had barely left the house all week. Even a simple walk in the back garden was out of the question. Hisashi's paranoia, coupled with the police's apathy towards the murders, made the eldest fear the maid's return. Hisashi, who was usually so calm and collected, had one weakness though, Inko Akatani. If Tamura had $1 for every day his brother had come home from classes growling about the woman, he would be as rich as their family was. That was why when he called Hisashi's professors earlier to request his brother's homework, he subtly dropped the woman's name into the conversation. And it worked. Now, as Tamura made his way with Izuku to the garden for some much-needed fresh air, there was no need to worry about Hisashi. His brother was currently too busy arguing to come out every 5 minutes to try and get them back inside. What Tamura didn't know was that his little plan to distract his brother would lead to a shaky partnership between the two currently arguing. That partnership would grow into friendship and eventually something much more. Afterwards, Inko started coming around more and more. Izuku smiled sadly. She and Hisashi worked for the rest of their schooling together, hammering out numerous laws and policy changes. She sounds like quite the woman, Tsukachi remarked, having only a rudimentary knowledge of how long something like those could take. Oh, she was, Izuku nodded. It had taken him longer to warm up to the woman than his brothers. But once he started to get to know her better, Inko became someone she became his closet confidant. 4 years of putting up with Hisashi made Inko a force of nature. Before even graduating, she started making news. Had a bunch of offers from big companies looking to hire her. Toshinori watched out of the corner of his eyes, watched as Gran Torino suddenly stopped. He'd been walking along the row of headstones just a little away from the woman's gravesite. She turned every single one of them down. Izuku chuckled lightly, remembering the staggering number of offers that Inko had used to compete with his brother's own letters. Even Hisashi asked her to be our family lawyer. But Inko just smiled and told him that's not the right question. The right question? Go on a date with me, Izuku sighed, standing up and dusting the dirt off his knees. I guess somewhere along the way they fell for each other. Hisashi, though being dummy that he was, didn't think Inko liked him romantically. Aizawa snorted. Working in a high school, he had seen this exact same scenario play out hundreds of times. Heck, he had even been one of those stupid teenagers with Hisashi. That is until Namuri and Tensei joined forces and locked the pair in a room together and didn't let them out until they admitted it. Who made the first move? Shoyuta asked curiously. Izuku looked away from the statue for a moment. Inko, though Hisashi always swore it was him. Toshinori coughed lightly, wondering how All for One asked such a remarkable-sounding woman on a date. They met at the courthouse, and Hisashi asked if she wanted to get a cup of coffee to catch up. The barista there started flirting with Inko, who flirted back. Izuku recounted the story. She wanted to see if Hisashi really was interested in her. And well, Hisashi being Hisashi. Izuku trailed off, leaving what happened next to everyone's imagination. The only thought the entire group had was that poor barista. Next thing me and Tamura know, we're standing next to Hisashi in the courthouse, and Inko is walking signing her name to the marriage certificate. The all-or-nothing user chuckled. Hisashi had wanted to do a huge ceremony and make whatever wedding fantasy Inko had a reality. Turns out Inko wasn't one for making a big deal out of something and preferred to use the money towards their honeymoon. She could never go get coffee at that courthouse again, and soon after that oh God. Izuku suddenly paled and slapped his hand over his mouth, running towards one of the bushes, throwing up. Toshinori ran to Izuku's side, not sure what to do right now. Are you okay? Stupid question. Of course not. You don't have to tell us, we can dash. No, Izuku shouted, throwing his arm to the side to create some distance, the tears the hero had wanted to see now flowing from Izuku's eyes. Someone has to know. Shigaraki, Aizawa said, taking a step towards the boy, ready to use his quirk at the first sign of lightning. I came home one day and there was nothing. Nobody. No sound. I got a bad feeling, but I didn't call anyone, Izuku said, grabbing his hair tightly and pulling on it. I'm so stupid. But why didn't I call anyone? Gran Torino winced. He had been exploring the other headstones when Izuku began his story. After seeing the names on them, he now had more questions than answers, but they could wait. Izuku was caught up in his memories right now. As someone who had been a hero for longer than most of the others had been alive, he had seen his fair share of trauma. One wrong move or word, and this wouldn't end well. For any of them. So Sorahiko did the intelligent thing and hung back, letting Toshinori and Aizawa handle the teenager. I searched the house. And no one was there. I made my way to Emidori's house and Izuku turned and threw up again, images hitting him all at once. The phantom smell of BLD assaulting his nostrils. The BBLD, there was so much of it. I walked inside and Rin with large nails through her hands and head, keeping her in front of the stove. Kahaku, his throat slit and tipped back with a paper in his hands. Each of the other staff members posed in some grotesque parody of an everyday task. There was a noise. Inko was lying on the floor as she had been shot. I didn't even hear a gunshot. There was so much BBBLD. Izuku, looking at his hands, warm BLD, flashed for a second. Izuku thinks that he had tried to stop the bleeding. He remembers Inko asking him to take her power and give it to Hisashi. Telling him, "Intamo and run," Izuku whispered, collapsing to the ground. One hand reached behind to his back, hovering over a long-healed scar, remembering the stabbing of pain. He had looked towards the crib where his nephew stood crying for him before. See, she shot him. He was only 3 and she shot him. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Hisashi was still asleep when his appealing dreams turned to nightmares. Suddenly he was transported to things he would have rather forgotten. Hisashi had just finished up a meeting with the Prime Minister when his secretary had come running up to them, barely able to speak. Instantly Hisashi knew something was wrong and excused himself, his chauffeur already waiting for him at the front of the building. Flashing lights and microphones bombarded the rising politician before he even stepped out of the car. When Hisashi had finally been able to push past the vultures that called themselves the media, he was greeted with the grim faces of the police. Demanding to know what had happened, one of the uniformed officers had led him inside, where Tamura was sitting on the stairs paler than he had ever seen before. The middle brother had looked up at Hisashi with red-rimmed eyes, and he knew. Hisashi wasn't sure how, but he just knew that the thing he had been dreading for so many years had finally happened. She had come back, the woman who went by the nickname the Cleaner amongst anti-abilities movements. And there was Tamura sitting on the staircase all alone. No Inko comforting him. No Izuku holding Mikumo. All the staff that should have been there hovering in the background, absent. Hisashi's legs had given out in understanding, and he screamed, beating his hands against the floor till they bled. He had begged Tamura to tell him it wasn't true when the younger brother tried to comfort him. He cried louder when he saw Inko's limp hand fall out from beneath a white sheet, the wedding ring she loved so much glittering cruelly from the flashbulbs. Vomited when a small body was brought out, knowing that his son, his appealing Mikumo, was gone forever. Izuku had long been loaded into an ambulance, stabbed in the back and left for dead inches from the gruesome discovery the police had made in the crib. Judging from the wound, the paramedics and doctors were worried that the youngest brother wouldn't survive the night. Through it all, something dark began to take root and grow inside Hisashi's heart. All the fighting his family had done to help people hadn't been enough to save them. That was the first time sitting there on the hospital bench that a particular memory hit Hisashi. You know, Inko smiled, laying in his arms one night. The moonlight from the window giving her an ethereal glow. I've heard some people have started giving themselves nicknames. Something that fits with their abilities. I think we should do the same. Oh, really? Hisashi said, looking at his wife's shoulder, giving her a kiss. Then yours should defiantly have the word queen in it. Or maybe goddess with you, I'm never sure which one fits you better. Inko snorted. I was actually thinking of something from I saw in the library. In that book your grandfather brought back from France. Go on. I want to be all for one, Inko spoke, sitting up with an excited smile on her face. All those people out there who need help. They come to see me looking for it. All for one, Hisashi repeated, the taste of it smooth on his tongue. It sounds perfect for you. And you, Inko continued, should be one for all. After all, you're one person who tries to help everyone. All for one and one for all, Hisashi chuckled, remembering grandfather reading him the book the phrase had come from when he was small. It hadn't been until he retired that he saw what a spoiled woman his daughter had become and tried to be better for his grandson. Together forever. Inko smiled and snuggled back into her husband's arms. Forever together. Forever, it seemed, was a very short time. As the weeks passed, the Shigaraki family grieved, and the hatred in Hisashi's heart grew deeper every time he looked into Izuku's empty eyes. What Izuku had gone through in that house had broken him, and not being able to save anyone had rendered him mute. There were times when he would grab Hisashi's sleeve and open his mouth to try and say something. But nothing would come out no matter how much he tried. Tamura tried his best to help his brothers. But the combination of it, trying to run their school and his own grief, weighed heavily on the middle brother's health. Then Izuku was killed, or so he thought at the time. The clinic where he took his physical therapy blew up not long after Izuku had entered. It was clear to Hisashi just who the target was, so he made the group responsible paid for it in with their lives. Things quickly progressed after that. Tamura found his brother paranoia, ever-growing, spinning out of control. No matter how many quirks he stole or people joined him, it was never enough. Tamura tried talking to Hisashi about his brother's actions as they grew more and more extreme. Burning the building where records housing information on everyone with quirks had been the final straw. Especially when it took several other record-keeping buildings with it earning the nickname the Great Fire. Tamura had finally had enough and tried to leave, only to find himself locked away in what appeared to be an old bank vault. Hisashi standing on the other side of the door telling him he would understand soon enough. The stockpile quirk was originally just supposed to collect the sun's energy and store it within Tamura's body, strengthening it. The middle Shigaraki's health had grown so bad Hisashi was afraid he would soon be left alone. How was he supposed to know that Tamura had a quick that would merge with it? Hisashi had never used his own powers on his brothers before. It wasn't until he had found the vault empty one day that he quickly realized that Tamura had gained his own small group of followers. People from within his own organizations did not agree anymore with what he was doing. They had banded together and taken his brother from him, so Hisashi went to work finding them. There had been so many close calls over the next couple of years. Sometimes Hisashi got close to Tamura, only for the man to slip away. Other times they would glimpse each other only for a brief moment. Their last meeting, the one before Tamura fell to a stray bullet from the two groups clashing, he found Hisashi sitting atop a pile of corpses. The man was humming an old lullaby, the same song they had sung to Izuku and Mikumo when they were young. And sitting there amongst the sea of carnage that had once been the high-ranking members of Cleaner's militia, Hisashi had looked up at Tamura. His white hair was now stained a bright red, a serene smile on his face when he dropped the woman's severed head. Tamura had gulped and looked at his brother fearfully. "Who are you now, brother?" Hisashi laughed, raising his foot at stomping on the head, shattering the skull instantly. "She told me forever together, you know." Hisashi smiled again, not as serene this time. No, this one was full of cruelty and malice, and he started laughed louder. The severed head now a bloody mess under his feet. "And now she's gone. But she did leave me with something to remember her by." Standing up among the corpses, the last of Izuku Shigaraki allowed itself be dragged under an ocean of darkness. The man's bloody hands reached up and slicked back his hair before he gave a formal bow. "Greetings, my beloved brother. You may call me All for One." Mei held onto Mimi's hand tightly as the sisters made their way to the inn. Neither of them had seen Izuku yesterday at the park but thought nothing of it. Maybe the curly-haired boy had gotten busy and lost track of time like Mei did when she was inventing. However, when he didn't show up again today, Mimi got really worried, claiming that something had to be wrong. Izuku wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. She'd insisted, grabbing the bottom on Mei's shirt. "He promised me he would say goodbye." Mei herself wasn't sure what Charming would or wouldn't do. Sure, she liked the boy. Izuku was smart, and talking to him was like tapping into old forgotten knowledge Mei hadn't known existed. Seriously, she had never even thought putting biometric scanners on her babies before he asked. All the chaos people could do if they just got a hold of one of Mei's precious creations. But the most important thing is that he made Mimi sad. And if there was one thing Mei Hatsum would never forgive, it was someone who hurt her little sister. Her classmate from school had learned this lesson all too well recently. Not to mention some sketchy-looking guys had been hanging around the park watching the sisters since yesterday. They could just be people who recognized Mimi from the video and wanted to meet Izuku. But something told the older Hatsum that wasn't the case. Stepping through the automatic doors, the sisters made their way to the front desk. The woman on duty took one look at them and smiled. "Here to thank that young man, are you?" Mei's eyes narrowed in suspicion. "How did you dash? I've seen the video," she interrupted, looking down at the younger girl and giving a strange smile. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry that happened to you. You didn't deserve that given your condition." Mei thought, realizing what was happening. This woman pitied Mimi. She looked at the girl and saw a fragile doll that needed to be protected. It shouldn't surprise Mei anymore. Mimi was quirkless. Putting on her best show woman smile, Mei bowed and thanked the woman, keeping up the appearance until the room's door opened and her favorite hobo stood there. "Power Loader's future headache," he greeted, looking at Mei and then glancing at the younger Hatsum, a soft smile barely there. "And Mimi, how can I help you today?" "We dash, Izuku," Mimi yelled, pushing past the man and running towards the boy sitting in the farthest corner of the room staring out the window. Mimi grabbed onto the boy with her might, tears springing from her eyes. "I was so worried." Izuku turned his head, giving Mei a good look at the dark circles under his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mimi, I haven't been feeling well." "Are you sick?" "No," Izuku said, shaking his head. "Just some old memories making it hard to sleep." Mimi brightened up. "I can help. Grandpa has been teaching me about plants that help you sleep." "Has he now?" Izuku said, moving over a little so that Mimi could sit next to him. "Tell me what you've been learning." Mimi nodded and started talking about the different plants she had been learning about. With her sister distracted, May turned and looked at the three men. What happened? Don't know how it's Gran Torino began before his cheeks were gripped between powerful fingers. What are you mooing? My such plump cheeks you have for someone your age, May grinned, stretching the skin slightly. Reminds me of Machi. You should take care that someone with a hammer doesn't make a mistake and P&D your face instead. Toshinori and Aizawa watched the interaction closely. Gran Torino just lifted an eyebrow, his checks still trapped. Are you fretting me? Oh no, I would never do that, May grinned larger, letting go of the retired hero's face. Just giving you a small warning. You never know who you might come across late one night. The pair stared at each other for a few moments before Gran Torino laughed. The girl had a pair on her. The last person to talk to him like this was Nana. I like you. Toshinori breathed a sigh of relief as Aizawa coughed. Now that you're finished, warning Gran, I'm sure you and Mimi have to be getting home. No sir, May said, shaking her head, dreadlocks whipping back and forth. Mom's working late tonight. As long as I have us home in time for homework and bed, we're free to do whatever. The underground hero's eyes narrowed. What about dinner? That's what convivence stores are for. Mimi pipped up before turning back to Izuku to continue their conversation. Out of the mouths of babes, May said, wiping away a fake tear. But you're growing girls, Toshinori said with concern evident in his voice, looking at the pair. You need proper meals. Not store-bought stuff. Toshinori's right, Gran said, looking at the girl. It was easy for heroes to get lost in their work and live off convivence store food and take out. It wasn't a bad thing, but eventually your poor diet caught up with you, and usually right in the middle of a battle. You, young people these days you two have no room to talk, Aizawa hissed, fixing both men with a look. One of you eats nothing but taiyaki. Well, the other is on a specialized diet. My injury Hey, Gran Torino jumped up, pointing at Aizawa. Nice to meet you, Mr. Ivan Coffee and Jelly Pack. I'm Kettle. Aizawa looked away, his ears a little red. I never said I was a role model on healthy eating either. Why don't they just stay for dinner here then? Izuku's voice rang out. The three males looked at the boy in surprise. The inn always makes plenty of food. Now May looked uncomfortable. We don't want to intrude. Nonsense, Toshinori said, placing one hand on May's shoulder. We would love to have you both stay for dinner. My friend Tsukachi called earlier, he got us some donuts. Both sisters suddenly perked up at the mention of the treats. Okay, May nodded, fixing Izuku with a look. But only if you tell us what's wrong. Izuku looked surprised for a moment before he felt something grip him a little tighter. Looking down, he saw Mimi's knuckles turning white as she held onto his shirt. Please, Izuku, the girl pleaded. You helped me. Izuku sighed at the determined look in Mimi's large eyes. We came to Naboo to look for my family. Are they not here? Mimi asked. Izuku shook his head. They're just there. May knew the second she saw the tears starting to fall what had happened. Once upon a time she had seen her mother trying to explain the exact same thing to her. Walking over to the boy, the inventor dropped to her knees and pulled him into a hug, turning her head to look at her sister. Bud, remember when we talked about Dad? May spoke softly, feeling the tears soak into her shoulder. How you couldn't see him 'cause he went to another place? Mimi nodded. Did Izuku's family go away like Dad did? Yeah, Izuku spoke, pulling away from May, wiping his eyes. You know that graveyard at the big house at the corner of town? That's where my family is. Both handsome sisters looked shocked. You mean the Demon's Sanctuary? The what? Gran Torino asked. The Demon's Sanctuary, May explained, looking at the men. It's an old story around here. They say that a demon lived in the woods a long time ago and vowed that if anyone disturbed his family's resting place, he would destroy the town. No one goes there 'cause they're all scared, Mimi continued. Except for Grandpa. But that's 'cause the demon gave him special permission. Toshinori felt like his throat had suddenly gone dry as he looked at the sisters. Could you tell us your grandfather's address? I think we need to talk to him. Gran Torino impatiently hit the doorbell again with his cane. Toshinori stood next to his teacher, looking nervous, praying that someone was inside. He would have come himself, but Gran had insisted, something about the other gravestones and answers. What's taking so dim and long? Sir, please dash, LD or horses I'm coming. A voice came before the door opened, revealing an old man with a strange teardrop mark on his face. Can I help you? Gran Torino took one look at the man and dropped his cane in shock. Quirk activating, he prepared to lay a strong kick on the man. He would have succeeded if Toshinori hadn't activated one for all and grabbed onto his teacher. Let me go, you fool. Gran struggled in the number 1 hero's arms. Don't you know who that is? Gran, please calm. All might began as a fist came out and hit his side. Coughing, the hero deflated again. Toshinori, Gran gasped, turning around, looking ashamed, realizing where he had hit. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Toshinori, the man said, eyes squinting as he pulled out a pair of glasses from inside his shirt. As soon as they were on, his eyes widened as soon as they landed on the jet hero. Gran Torino, is that you? Ring Mz. Gran grunted, crossing his arms. Been a long time. Ring Mstr. If you're here, then this is. Old eyes looked at Toshinori, who gave a weak smile in return as he waved. I see. Well, coming. I'll make us some tea. The man turned around and walked back into the house. Toshinori went to follow, but Gran stopped him. Whatever you do, don't take your eyes off the rings he's wearing. His quirk lets him telekinetically control them. Gran stomped into the house a second later, Toshinori following a second later, wondering if the retired hero had not noticed that the man hadn't been wearing any rings. Neither saw the old man when they entered the kitchen. Toshinori sat down while Gran Torino started snooping around the room, opening doors and cupboards. The sound of the door creaking open alerted the pair to their host's return and had the jet hero in a chair next to Toshinori instantly, almost as if he had been there from the start. Ringmer, as Gran called him, shuffled towards the table, a large book in his arms. Without a word, he placed it on the table and sat down. What, no tea? Gran sniped. It's steeping, the man said, his gold eyes amused as he looked at the retired hero smirking. You got old? Gran bristled. Like you have any room to talk, you old thief? The man chuckled lowly and looked at Toshinori before pulling the book to him. Opening it up, he flipped through a few pages before finding what he was looking for and showed it to the pair. It was an old newspaper clipping showing a younger-looking version of the man in front of them. He was dressed true to his name as what you would see the ringmaster of circus wear as he fought against Nana. She was something else, that Nana Shimura, the man said, getting up and going into the kitchen. Hell, to fight, I can tell you that. Toshinori reached, shaking hands out towards the book, looking at the woman as he started flipping the pages. Article headline declaring the name Circus as the new incoming villain group. A strong woman robbed not only an armored car but took the entire car for good measure. The deadly dancer of the sky, doll committing a daring high-rise theft that left many speechless and questioning how. Beast's brutal assault against police and heroes alike, holding them back single-handedly so his teammates could escape. Whoever had taken that photo was able to capture the exact moment where a young Gran Torino's leg came down on the man's arm. Nana herself was shown on the next page, her cape-shredded body littered with wounds as she faced off against the knife-wielding bloody jester. On and on the pages went as crimes got more daring, more public, and even more violent until suddenly, they just stopped. Quite the resume, wouldn't you say? The man said, placing 3 cups on the table. Made me quite the important villain back in the day. Made you a bloody nuisance is what it did, Gran Torino said, sniffing the tea, trying to see if it was poisoned. Thought you died after? Yes, about that. There's something I've always wanted to say to you too, the man spoke, coming around the table. Gran tensed, grabbing the teacup prepared use as a distraction, expecting an attack from the old rogue. Instead, the man just got on the ground and bowed deeply to the pair, his forehead touching the ground. I'm so sorry for my weakness. If I had just called all for one that day instead of trying to stop them myself, maybe I could have saved her. Toshinori heard the cup crack in Gran's hand. I know I have no right to ask forgiveness of either of you. I don't expect you to forgive me after what happened, but please, the old villain said, lifting his head, sorrow and regret on his face. Please believe me when I say I tried to stop them. There was a heavy feeling in the atmosphere for a long time. Toshinori didn't know what was going on and was too afraid to ask. The man stayed there kneeling on the floor in front of the entire time, Gran watching him before finally speaking softly. You? Kotaro told the police he heard his dad scream when a name in a funny hat grabbed him and ran out of the house. It was you, wasn't it? The man flinched and sat up nodding. All for One has this rule. You can fight a hero, you can kill and maim them, but their children and families are off limits. For a man who's called the first demon, it's a strangely kind thing. I don't understand, Toshinori said, understanding just who this man, who these people were. This was the leader of the group that killed Nana's husband. All for One never sanctioned the attack, the former ring yamter swore. I don't know who told the others about Shimura's family or why, but All for One never ordered it. The cup finally broke in Gran's hand as he looked at the man. Tell me everything you remember about that day. Right now. I hear you had quite the time in Naboo, Nedzu said, placing the tea set on the table between himself and Izuku. I've been given what I assume is an abridged version of the events. My condolences for your loss. Thank you, Izuku said, reaching into a bag and pulling out a box of traditional sweets Aizawa said the principal enjoyed. Have you recovered anything more about what happened to you? Nedzu asked, still having no luck finding where Izuku had been held prisoner for the past 2 centuries. The boy shook his head. There is a chance that those memories might never return, Nedzu continued, addressing the elephant in the room, taking a sip of tea. How would you feel about that? I don't know, Izuku answered honestly. Some part of him wanted to know who did this to him and why. And yet another part was scared, frozen in fear of what he might discover. Hearing a little from Gran and Toshi about what had happened between his older brother made him worry. Could Hisashi? Izuku shook his head. Toshi asked me if I would be willing to see someone. It's just finding someone willing to take on all of Izuku gestured to himself. That's where we're finding the problem. Have you considered talking to Hound Dog? Nedzu spoke, a faint twinkle appearing in his eye. He's a licensed psychiatrist. Doesn't he only deal with students? Nedzu nodded, moving in, poised to strike. Primarily, yes, the students are who he deals with. But our teachers sometimes go see him also. But I don't go here, Izuku argued. Even though you're being really nice and tutoring me, I'm not an official student. Would you like to be? WWA? Unfortunately, even with our accelerated curriculum, it would be impossible to enroll you this year, Nedzu continued, taking one of the traditional sweets out of the packaging. But that gives us time to prepare you for the next year's hero course. The hero course? Izuku exclaimed, standing up. But sure, I guess if you think about it, I've had some experience working as a vigilante. But I've told you how I feel about sending teenagers out. It's like the government is endorsing child soldiers. And I've had enough experience with that to know that it was wrong then, and it's still wrong now. Child soldiers. Nedzu thought, wondering what else Izuku had run into at the beginning of Quirks. It was like the high-specs user had found a new game, prying all the repressed knowledge from the boy without him even realizing it. I agree. In a perfect world, UA would be a university or college and not a high school, Nedzu nodded, placing his cup on the saucer. But the grim reality is that no matter how much we prepare the average 40 students we are supposed to teach, many will still retire or pass away before they're 30. Then why do it at all? Because there are still people out there that need our help, Nedzu answered, looking out the window, his scar throbbing slightly. And people who hurt others because they can? Izuku was silent for a moment. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. Izuku paused just as he was about to take another bite. Him a hero. It sounded like something from those comics and manga Hisashi and Tamura would read to him when he was younger. How can you be a hero when you can't even save your own family? Shaking the dark voice away, Izuku put his lunch back down on the branch and leaned back, moving so that he was hanging with just his legs. Exercising was always a good way for Izuku to clear his mind, and the tree's branches were just thick enough that he could do some pull-ups. The boy had barely done 20 when a loud voice startled him. Found you? Something blue flew quickly past Izuku. Grabbing the branch, Izuku was about to yell at whatever it was when, oich my god! Covering both his eyes. So suddenly Izuku released his hold on the branch, sending him plunging towards the earth. It wasn't a huge drop, but it defiantly would have hurt if someone hadn't caught him. Hello there, a bright voice greeted as thick arms held Izuku. Nice to meet you. Thanks for dropping in. I'm gonna die. I did something horrible and now I'm gonna die. Nijire floated back down, looking at the bright red kid Mirio was holding. What's wrong with him? Heido, Amajiki said, his own ears a little pink. Your skirt? My skirt? Nejiri repeated, cluing in a second later and giving a small cry, holding the item down as she blushed. She had just been so excited when she saw the subject of her hunt that she just flew on instinct. I'm so sorry, the mystery boy continued, turning to where he thought Nijire was standing, hands still covering his eyes. I did see. But I shouldn't have looked. The boy went limp in Mirio's arms, accepting his fate. Just make it quick. The three friends looked at each other for a moment before they all started laughing. Izuku waited a moment just to make sure this wasn't a trick of some sort before pulling his hands away. Don't worry, Mirio smiled. It was an accident. Now, if it had been on purpose, a dark expression overcame the ordinarily bubbly girl's face, and she slammed a fist into her open palm. Gring wave. Tamaki shivered. Scary. Very. Izuku nodded in agreement, glancing up and noticing the other boy's pointed ears. Moving in Mirio's arms, Izuku shoved his face right in front of Tamaki's, studying them seriously for a moment before smiling. How cute! You look just like the elves from Lord of the Rings. Tamaki squeaked at the bright face in front of him. He decided right then and there that this kid was one of Mirio's kind, a bright shining person who was like the sun. Lord of the what? Mirio asked, earning a gasp from the boy. Oh, you poor children, Izuku mourned, shaking his head. 200 years and already people had forgotten the classics. Gather round. Let me take you to tell you about a land called Middle-earth. The next big three sat down and listened to the story for the remainder of the lunch break as Izuku. Sir Nitai's office Mirai sighed as he looked over the paperwork. So far, the only thing he had on the man who called himself Overhaul was a name and the paperwork showing that he had been adopted by the family's current head. What his motives were for distributing quirk-enhancing drags or what his plans were was still a mystery. A message is here. Grabbing his phone, the former sidekick was surprised to see Mirio's name as the sender. Glancing at the clock he frowned. The boy should just be starting afternoon classes. Not one to neglect his education, another reason why Mirio deserved to inherit one for all. Night Eye opened up the message. Dear sir, sorry to bother you, but I just had to tell you that I found this fun story I think you'll like. See Tashinori. Mirio was perfect, always thinking of others. Just what you would expect from the future #1 hero. My new friend Izuku, the one Nijire's been hunting, calls it Lord of the Rings. I think you'll really like it. Degree oh, there was even a picture as well, the man thought, having a sip of coffee before choking on it a second later. There right between Ryukyu and Fat Gum's interns, along with Mirio, was All for One face smiling shyly at the camera as he made a peace sign. How was this possible? All for One was dead. There was no way he could have survived the injuries Tashinori gave him. Is it possible? Could this be All for One's child? Did Tashinori or Nedzu know that someone sharing All for One's genetics had infiltrated UA? He had to. Tashinori had been at UA not too long ago with somebody. Awada, sir said, jumping onto the intercom as he grabbed his briefcase, shoving things randomly inside. I need a train ticket ASAP. Any place in mind specifically, came the immediate response. Just get me the fastest route to my tower. There was a slight gasp followed by a bit of static before the woman replied. Yes, sir. Mirai would find out what was going on, and he would find out straight from the source. Nibu the man formerly known as Ring Ist stood with one foot on top of the young criminal, placing his cane directly in the center of the man's forehead. Now see here, young man, the retired villain said, gesturing to the man's unconscious companion. I can forgive you and your friend there have been following those girls around. I've seen the video and understand you may have been a little starstruck. But today, you made the big mistake of trying to grab one of them. Poking the thug's forehead, the old man leaned down, his golden eyes becoming much sharper. Now you're gonna tell me who sent you and hand over whatever you've been using to talk to them. Phew, old man. I ain't telling you shit. Sora Takami, the retired villain, formerly known as the Ring Yamsu, smiled. As the current keeper of the demon sanctuary, he couldn't help but be thankful for his new strength-boosting quirk which helped him keep the young fool pinned down. His former quirk, BLD Link, allowed him to telekinetically control small objects that had been soaked in his BLD. The longer left to soak or the more BLD used, the stronger the connection. His preference a set of 10 rings that were the first things he had ever stolen. But that quirk was long gone, taken from him before he was tossed in jail by All for One, the demon's own version of punishment. Sora never expected to get his quirk, or any quirk for that matter, back from the man. Not after what had happened under his watch. Yet upon his release, the old demon had been waiting for him. This time with a small boy hidden in his shadow. Sora had expected death at first but instead was offered a job and a new quirk. The newly released prisoner had shaken his head. He didn't deserve anything after what happened. This pleased the demon for some reason because Sora next found himself waking up on the floor of his house. A letter was on the table along with a cell phone. It explained what quirk All for One had given Sora, along with the specifics of his new job. The mansion not too far away had its own staff to care for and maintain the house and expansive garden. All Sora would have to do was take care of the small graveyard a short walk from the house until he felt he was no longer able to. You listening to me, old man? The thug grinned. Soon as I beat your butt, I'm gonna sell the brat to the highest bidder. Should be worth a couple bucks despite her being a Kadash slam with finesse he hadn't shown since his days in circus. Sora flipped the cane over and hit the man as hard as he could. Instantly the thug was knocked out, and judging by wound where Sora had hit him, there was a good possibility that there was some brain damage also. Not that it mattered right now. Anyone who threatened May and Mimi like that would pay the price. Those girls were the lights of his life. They appeared one day in a cloud of smoke, all smiles and laughter, blowing away all the darkness inside Sora's heart as they declared a worthless piece of scum like him as their new grandpa. His own son wanted nothing to do with him. But May and Mimi, they loved him. And Sora would be mad if he didn't do everything in his power to make sure they stayed safe. Opening the bleeding man's jacket, the old man grabbed the cell phone and opened it. Had young people today never heard of locking their phones? Finding the most common number and calling it. It rang a few times before a tired voice picked up. You idiots better be on your way back. I'm not paying you if you've broken the contract. Well, that's odd, Sora hummed, looking up at the sky, watching as a bird took flight. What contract could that be, I wonder? Who is this? Not your 2 employees, I can tell you that, Sora grinned. Tell me, do you know Naboo's nickname in the underworld? There was a slight hesitation before the other man spoke. Off limits? Bingo, he cheered. Seems whoever was on the other end was connected to All for One in some way. There were a few others like Sora in Naboo reported to the villain about any organizations trying to make a move into the city. So far none of them had ever once succeeded. Now, since you know that, why have you sent people here? Their contract was straightforward. Observe and report, the man on the other end answered. But recently, they reported the target had left. Idiots had the bright idea that grab someone the target had been talking to, thinking it would get them a bonus. Sora's hand gripped the phone tighter as he heard the other thug groan. Eyes sharpening as he walked over and hit the man equally as hard as he had his partner. Then he just kept hitting. These men would have taken Mimi trying to get to someone else. They could have hurt her or May. They would have sold his girls to some sicko out there once they were done with them. Death was too good for these men. They needed to suffer first. Sora was breathing hard by the time he was finished beating both men to a bloody pulp. All the while, the man on the phone listened patiently to the sound of flesh being beaten over and over again. I take it my men aren't coming back. Naboo if off limits, Sora growled into the phone. Follow your target anywhere else but not here. Never. Here. I understand, the man answered. I will contact All for One and explain myself. Would you like me to have somebody come and dispose of the bodies? Don't worry, I have someone who can handle them, Sora growled, hating knowing who had to contact next. I'll inform All for One of your cooperation. Between that and you ordering them back, you shouldn't be reprimanded too harshly. I foresee a few freebies in my future. The man sighed as the pair said their goodbyes. Walking back into the house, Sora was glad he had sent Mimi home instead of here. All the BLD on him would have just made the girl worry. After washing his hands, Sora made his way to the hall closet and reached onto the top shelf, pulling a box down. Opening it up, there was the same cell phone that had been left to him, still sitting right where he had left it. Pressing a single number, the answer was almost immediate. Groundskeeper, Kurogiri's deep voice spoke. Are you compromised? I have 2 idiots in my backyard, Sora answered. Someone sent an observe and report team into Naboo, and they went off script. That is unfortunate, the Warp Gate user replied. But why is that something Sensei should care about? 'Cause earlier this week I had some visitors, Sora spoke. Now he was glad he had put those cameras up in the graveyard after Gran Torino and Nana's boy had come to visit him. They were connected to Shimura. Personally, connected if you catch my meaning. There was the sound of shuffling and the creaking of a door before Kurogiri answered. What would you have me do with these men? After what I did, they're gonna be out for a while, Sora said, knowing that it would take a few weeks recovery time after the beating he gave. But they made certain threats towards some people I know. They'll be back once they're healed up. And I don't want that, Sora said, putting the kettle on. A nice cup of tea would certainly calm his nerves right now. I think they need to take a trip to Acheron. There was a slight sound on the other end, almost like Kurogiri had taken a sharp breath. Are you sure? Once I take them there, you can't change your mind. Sora looked over towards the picture on the wall. It was him, May and Mimi at a contest May had won, something about building robots. May was holding Mimi while the girl proudly showed the first place medal and robot to the person taking the photo. Sora stood next to May, looking at the girl with pride in his eyes. Suddenly he was back in jail sitting opposite of a boy wearing a high school uniform. Large brownish-red wings on his back that looked so much like another's as he glared at the prisoner. You aren't my father. No matter what Ma says, you ain't my family. This is the first and only time you'll ever see me understand. Sora Takami had been many things in his life. A thief. A villain. And for a brief second he was a husband. The last one though was debatable, given he was thrown into jail before the paperwork could be turned in. He may never have gotten a chance to be a father to his own son or any children he might have had. But no matter what, he would do right for these girls. No regrets, Sora spoke ice in his tone. And tell Sensei I need to talk to him. There's something he needs to see. Toshinori hummed happily as he took another bite of chicken, savoring the taste. It wasn't much, but the slight flavor was a definite improvement from the bland hospital food chicken he had lived off for the past 5 years. After they had returned from Naboo, Izuku had taken a closer look at the hospital meals Toshinori usually ate and given the hero a scathing look. All it took was few hours of mumbling to himself on the computer, a quick call to Recovery Girl and a trip to the grocery store. Then Toshinori was in heaven, eating food that he hadn't thought possible anymore. Smiling to himself, number 1 hero ate the last bit of food, having worked up quite an appetite patrolling today. I packed you a special dessert today, Izuku smiled as he held out the lunchbox. Plain yogurt all the time can get boring. Pulling out the container and opening the lid, Toshinori felt his mouth water at the sight of fresh melon. It had been long since he had fresh fruit like this that he didn't even notice the raised voices. Go in there, a female shrieked. You'll just have to wait. Remember who it is you are speaking to, a familiar voice had Toshinori choking on the fruit. And who exactly it was that hired you in the first place? The door slammed open suddenly, and Sir Night-Eye stood there. Gold Eyes immediately zeroing in and pining the blonde down with a fierce glare. Yagi, the man said, pushing his glasses up, light glinting off them dangerously. How nice to see you again. Mr. Yagi, the floor manager spoke, looking between the man. Please forgive me. Sir Night-Eye has come looking for All Might. I told him that he was in a meeting, But Tashinori sighed and put the container lid back on his melon. Due to his appearance, most of the staff looked at the blonde with pity. Though Tashinori was his own secretary, many whispered if it was okay for such a sick man to be working. It made eating in the canteen awkward, so he just ate at his other desk most of the time. Thankfully, since Tashinori was just as skilled at paperwork as he was at heroing, no one had tried to pressure him into leaving. But there was always someone with their eyes on the title of All Might's personal secretary. "That's all right," the blonde said, standing up and smiling kindly. "We finished early. All Might just stepped out to get lunch. If Sir Night Eye is willing, I can keep him company until he returns." Sir pulled his arm out of the woman's grasp. "That will be fine. Leave us." The woman looked at Tashinori with concern, but he just gave her a thumbs up, and she sighed, closing the door behind her. "Mirai," Tashinori began awkwardly gesturing to the couches. "It's nice to see you again." The former sidekick nodded and sat down, putting his briefcase on the table. "Don't get the wrong idea. I'm here on business." Tashinori sighed deeply. He should have expected that as he watched as the man pull files out. Some part of him always hoped that Mirai would call him first to talk about their breakup, as the media called it. Realistically, Tashinori knew he could have called first. Nothing was stopping him. It's just that talking to the Foresight user was super awkward, and he always brought up retirement and One for All. "I received an interesting text yesterday from Mirio." Sir began reaching into his jacket and pulling out his phone. "It gave me great concern, so I started digging." Tashinori gulped as Mirai leaned backwards against the couch, hands coming to rest on folded knees. This was the pose that made Sir Night Eye famous amongst the police. It was exclusively used when he was interrogating someone. A few weeks ago, a boy was brought into Mustafu police station by All Might. He had nowhere to go and no family that could be found. Yet for some reason he was placed in protective custody. Not too long after that, it seems that All Might had visited Yuye. The student body gossiped about this for a while, since all the teachers apparently rushed to deal with a strange incident. Opening up one of the files, Tashinori saw a printout of himself shaking hands with citizens of Naboo. Just as Gran said, Tashinori had rushed out early on their last day and changed into his costume, making a public appearance. All Might visited the inn where they had stayed, the mayor's office and the train station, thanking everyone for being so kind. Ryukyu's new intern Hado is friends with Mirio. Lately, she's been hunting down someone rumored to be Nedzu's personal student. Now Mirai leaned forward, arms resting on knees as he stared at Tashinori from over his hands. "Yesterday, she found this person and Mirio sent me a photo of them." Opening the phone, Tashinori nearly spat out BLD when he saw Izuku sitting between three others. "I think I made some new friends today," the boy said, smiling for the first time since they returned from Naboo. "Can you believe they've never heard of Lord of the Ring? Kids today. Tell me honestly, are you hiding all for one secret love child?" Midnight raised an eyebrow looking at the boy who held out a box to her. "I'm so sorry," Izuku bowed lowly. Well, all the other teachers watched curiously. "I was angry and it was wrong to lash out like I did. You could have been seriously hurt." Taking the box, Namuri opened it up carefully and was pleasantly surprised to see chocolate inside. Popping one of the treats into her mouth, she squealed in joy as the taste of dark chocolate and cherry hit her tongue. Examining the boy standing next to her, the woman liked her lips, wondering if he would be just as cute in a few years. "Such a good boy," Midnight said, leaning forward and tipping Izuku's head up slightly so that he was looking at her. "However, did you know my favorites?" Normally, when people got this close to Namuri, there was blushing, stammering, even fainting. But not Izuku. He just gave a familiar deadpan expression to the heroine. "Shoyuta told me." Everyone froze for a moment, eyes going to the couch where a yellow sleeping bag lay snoring. Namuri coughed and quickly regained her composure, smiling coyly. "You should still allow me to thank you," she purred, batting her eyelashes. "How about a kiss? Or perhaps you'll take a rain check, and I can pay you back when you're..." Liking her lips, Namuri leaned forward and whispered, "A little older." The other teachers rolled their eyes and waited for the fountain of BLD to come from the green-haired boy. Instead, Izuku just looked confused. I'm confused. Are you trying to thank me or ask me on a date? Izuku said, placing his hand on his chin. I've never been on a date before. And you're an appealing lady, but I wouldn't want to get involved in cradle robbing. A heavy silence fell over the room as the temperature around midnight dropped a few degrees. Vlad King moved his seat closer to Snipe and waited for the explosion of anger. The last time someone had mentioned Midnight's age was 2 years ago. Some arrogant upcoming hero had come to take part in a demonstration for the classes. Even now, his screams of terror still woke up some of the teachers. Nemuri gave a smile of pure ice. Are you saying I'm old? Izuku said, snapping back into reality and shaking his hands. Oh no, not at all. I'm just saying that a young lady like yourself shouldn't waste her time dating old men like me. A sudden strange sound sounded suspiciously like laughter as Aizawa unzipped his sleeping bag and got up. All right before midnight blows a gasket, the underground hero said, reaching into his personal mini-fridge and grabbing a jelly packet. Have you given any thought to school next year? Ah well, Izuku said, looking nervous and glancing at Hound Dog for some reason. Nedzu suggested I try applying for UA. Some of the teachers shivered, wondering what the principal was up to now. Present Mike, however, just looked excited, the radio host quickly adopting the boy as soon as Shoyuta had introduced them. Yo, that's such a great idea, Mike smiled brightly. So, what were you thinking, General? Support, business, or maybe the hero course? Izuku looked down and started playing with the hem of his shirt. I'm not sure yet, honestly. I think there's someone I need to talk to first before I make my decision. Aizawa hummed and nodded, understanding. Izuku had a powerful quirk that could be perceived as villainous even if he never used it entirely against another person. People were so obsessed with quirks now that someone like Izuku, who could take and destroy them, would no doubt be seen as a villain at best and a monster at worst. Not to mention that his eldest brother was the biggest villains around. All for One had destroyed entire criminal organizations with just a flick of his wrist when they threatened him. Destro and the Meta Liberation Army still the largest known ones to date. And if the media, or God forbid the HPSC, ever found out about Izuku's ties to All for One, not only was there a good chance the boy would never become a hero, but he could be locked away, never to see the light of day again under the guise of protecting the public. Hey, I know, Hizashi's voice broke Shoyuta out of his dark thoughts. Why don't we send you this